Okay. Good to go. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome in. Another Awesemo NBA deeper dive for you is, yes, we have basketball, and yes, it's meaningful basketball, and oh, yeah, there is a lot of value out there, a lot of money to be made. So alongside me, of course, for the next hour here, as we look at everything, is Adam Scherer. You can follow the both of us, Adam, on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS, me at Shander Show. Any questions you have, we have the chat going, the premium Slack running as well. And Adam, I know you're all jacked up still from the Wizards securing that play-in spot. Me here in Philly, I can't even see straight. It's the first time in 20 years the Sixers have the one spot, but we have to focus today as there's a lot of basketball and money to be made out there.
Yeah, a lot of basketball left, a lot of money to be made, a lot of moving parts again. It's going to be the same thing today and then tomorrow with 15 games, of course. So, yeah, I mean, this time of the year, it can be frustrating, I think, dealing with some injury or not even injuries, dealing with what teams are doing with their players. But at the same time, it does, I think, give you an opportunity for a little bit more edge than there is in some of these slates leading up to the last few. Because, I mean, at this point in the season, so much is like a known commodity. It's kind of hard to find things that other people aren't finding. So there is, if you're willing to put in the work, I think there's the potential to make some money on these last few slates.
That's a shorter slate for us. We've got the 5 games that we'll look at here on the show, but I'm just curious, overall, we do have a bunch of teams. Every game has some meaning, but not every team is still playing for something, right? You still have draft position for bad teams. So how do you overall just approach a slate like this? You mentioned as far as the end of the year where there are teams playing for stuff, but if it is a Chicago, if it is a Minnesota, if it is a team, let's say, that is eliminated, is there any deterrent or is there maybe an opportunity to actually have more value this late in the season for bad teams as opposed to the Knicks and the Suns and Brooklyn, the teams we know that are still playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends. And you can sort of gauge it by what teams' rotations have looked like recently. Like yesterday, for example, you saw it a lot because there were eight or nine games. You saw it a lot where like a lot of the teams didn't have anything to play for, but they also had kind of locked in their position in the lottery, so they didn't really have the incentive to lose. But even more than that, like you saw teams just sort of, you could count on them to run out some of their younger guys, run them for more minutes. So while, earlier in the season, of course, you would be expecting their good players to play, there was at least like some consistency that comes from teams that are looking to lose or looking to improve lottery odds. And then, of course, whatever teams are still playing for playoff positioning, you can count on their good players to play substantial minutes.
All right, before we jump in, another reminder, of course, you want to like, you want to share, you want to subscribe, you want to hit the notification bell. Also, everything that we do here is on the Awesemo Podcast Network, and that's easy. Just leave a 5-star rating at awesemo.com/podcast. And you, with your email, your Twitter handle, you can actually win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Sorry. Late night here with the Sixers celebration. All of that. Make sure that you keep up with everything that we're doing here on awesemo.com. You don't want to miss our strategy shows, our deeper dives, especially today as we have a shorter slate. You want to make sure that you are in tune with everything that Adam is laying out. So like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss anything. And also, as far as trying to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum, it's easy. Just leave a 5-star rating at any of our Awesemo podcasts, the Awesemo Podcast Network. Again, awesemo.com/podcast. Okay, one of those teams that we mentioned, Chicago and Brooklyn, as we start. Chicago, we know on the bottom end of it. Brooklyn, this is, I think, definitely the first time that you and I have had an opportunity to talk about Brooklyn with all 3 individuals of the big 3, not only active, but no Q, nothing even next to their names, Adam. So let's start with the Bulls, pardon me, in Brooklyn, the road team here. I don't know if you're looking at any specific value with Vooch up there at the top, 10-2 I see on DraftKings, Levine as well. These guys are going to be costly, but then we also have to factor in where they are, right? Not only in the schedule, but also in the standings.
Yeah, and I think with Chicago, at least to this point, they've still been running their guys big minutes, even though they're not playing for anything. They're eliminated from the playoffs. But I guess this is the first game since they've been eliminated technically, because Washington winning yesterday knocked them out. But I don't really know if that'll matter. Like, there's obviously only a couple games left. I don't know how much they care about easing up on Vucevic's minutes. So I think maybe there's a little bit more risk in guys like Vucevic and Levine than there normally would be. But I also, unless we get news from a beat writer, I'm not gonna just assume these guys play 26 minutes or anything like that, especially on a 5-game slate. So I do think there's still upside with those guys. I don't think they're necessarily priorities, but we had seen Vuce playing big minutes recently. Levine playing huge minutes as well. Kobe White even coming off a game with 41 minutes. So again, I don't think you're necessarily building around those guys, but Vooch does have a very high ceiling in this matchup against Brooklyn. We've seen him average almost 1.5 fantasy points per minute in the games he's played with Levine this year. So I don't mind taking some shots there as long as we don't get news from Chicago beat writers between now and lock that Vooch is going to be limited or anything.
Is there anything deeper on the bench? I know Thad Young we've brought up just as far as how minutes dependent he can be. Markkanen is going to be a cheap price. We know that at the very least on DraftKings, Fanduel as well. Is there anything deeper that maybe just in anticipation of, or just factoring in how the Bulls are going to be playing, even if Vooch and Levine, those guys don't suffer from any type of minutes restriction?
Yeah, I think the pricing on Young and Markkanen is fine. Again, just not guys that I'm really building around, but 5,600 on DraftKings for Young, 3,800 for Lauri Markkanen. The Bulls do have like a 113 implied total here, which is pretty high. And it's a good matchup. So you can see how potentially those guys exceed that salary. I don't think it's overly expensive. So definitely guys you can use, especially again, it's a 5-game slate. This isn't quite like yesterday where you just had, $2,500-$3,500 guys to choose from, and it would have made someone like that Young irrelevant. Today, I think he's more in play.
Yeah. And I just lastly on the Bulls, and it's more of a bigger picture thing too, in the event that we run into another team like this on the slate, which I think we will. But with Chicago, I don't even think you can at least preemptively think, Adam, that they're going to pull the reins back, because they're pretty much out of tank mode for the final 2 games of securing a better draft pick, where they are right on that 11 spot in the East. So this is not like Orlando or Detroit, where even Cleveland, where they may be in the race for that last spot in the East. I think they're pretty much out of it, which goes back to your point about Vooch, Levine, these top guys playing a lot of minutes and just getting out there, as opposed to all of a sudden pulling the reins back when, you're in the third quarter.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a tendency for people to just look and say like, oh, they're not in the playoffs. They want to lose, or they're tanking. But the Bulls are, they're 3.5 games up on Toronto for the next worst team in the East. So they're not catching them. They're not getting any worse. They are where they are. So it's still possible that these guys play fewer minutes, but really the only incentive would be just trying to keep Vooch and Levine from getting hurt, some catastrophic injury that would carry in the next year. Obviously a low probability thing. And assuming those guys want to play, probably a pretty hard sell to be like, hey guys, you're just, not going to really play today. So yeah, again, it's one of those, I'm treating it like Chicago runs their normal rotation unless we get word from a beat writer that's not.
3 guys at the top, all healthy here for Brooklyn, all heavily priced, right? Harden at the top at 10-8 on DraftKings. You're paying $10,000 for Durant, and then Irving slides in at 9-2. Theoretically, they could lose 2. Milwaukee could win 2, and the Nets find themselves dropping. So still playing for something. And then, of course, we know that this team has been accused of just being light, because the big 3 hasn't played together at all, really, when you look at the grand scheme of things. So I don't know how you factor that in with still trying to play a meaningful game or 2. And then on top of that, Adam, knowing that these guys haven't played together nearly at all when you look at it, and the need to play them as much as possible before the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what Brooklyn's starting lineup looks like today, because Harden came off the bench last game, played 25.7 minutes. They said that his minutes restriction would be relaxed today. It would make sense, I think, with everyone healthy, to move him back into the starting lineup, get prioritize getting minutes with Irving, Harden, and Durant on the floor, because we've only had 7 games so far this year with all 3 of those guys healthy, and it's certainly something they're going to need, that familiarity in the playoffs. So my guess is that Harden starts. I assume if he does, he probably plays like 30 to 32 minutes. It's the issue you're going to run into is that Harden's priced up on DraftKings, on FanDuel. Looking now, I know he was really cheap the other day. They've moved him to 10K, so he's not even really that cheap there. If you're getting 30 to 32 minutes from Harden, he's averaged 1.33 DraftKings points per minute in the games that he's played with Durant and Irving. He still has an upside because it's James Harden, but it's really hard to, I think, prioritize that production, given that he's probably not playing 38 minutes or something like that. And then you look to the other guys like Durant and Irving, obviously lose productivity as well. Durant 1.26 DraftKings points per minute in the games that they've played together this year. Irving is at 1.11. So these are all guys that are they still have a high ceiling because they're so good and they can just take over any given game. But in terms of like likelihood of success and average production, they're all priced for at least one of these guys to be out, and now none of them are.
Yeah, and I'm just looking, big picture at the top guys on the slate. We'll go game by game and we'll compare them as we get there. But normally, I wonder if you can look at guys like if it's AD, if it's LeBron, even Sabonis, right? But now with questionable injury tags and just looking at the possibility of them not playing a full game, even if it's due to circumstance outside of their injury, I wonder if that's enough, Adam, to maybe take or side with one of the Nets normally where you would look at better value, especially for the cost, but the injury factor for the other guys kind of weighing in.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really good point too. Like, even if not even necessarily saying like, if those guys play, are you concerned about the injuries? But like LeBron's questionable, Davis is questionable, and Sabonis is questionable. There's a world where by the time these games start, James Harden and Vooch and like Durant and Harden are 2 of the only 4 10K players available on the slate if all of Davis, Sabonis, and James were to sit. So like if that happens, then Harden and Durant and Irving will relatively look better, because even though their production isn't as good as it normally is and they're a little bit overpriced, you still have to get raw points somewhere, and your options on the slate are limited. Whereas if Davis and James and Sabonis play, then I think it's really hard to get to the Brooklyn guys ahead of some of that group.
Blake Griffin, anybody lower on this list? Landry Shamet, even at 3,700. And I guess that would be kind of factoring in how many minutes you expect from the big 3 to try and make a play there. Also expecting that there'll still be a lot of points scored minus the big 3, or at least 2 of the 3 out of there.
I like Nick Claxton here. Not a ton of confidence, but he's only 3,300 on DraftKings. His playing time's been ramping up lately. He played almost 23 minutes last game. I think he's someone that plays a decently sized role for them in the playoffs. Whether or not that happens, we'll see. But I think it makes sense for him to be getting like mid-20s in minutes. He's been about a fantasy point per minute guy this year. Again, only 3,300. If a bunch of guys get ruled out between now and lock, then Claxton's value relative to the slate goes down. But with how things are setting up right now, I think a $3,300 Claxton's a pretty decent play.
All right, as promised, each and every day here, Awesemo Plus, we have a free tool for you to use, player rankings, where you can take advantage of everything here on the NBA big board for you. And if you're an Awesemo Plus user, new Awesemo Plus user, with everything going on right now, we're about to hit the NBA playoffs, 2 more days in the regular season, today and tomorrow, and then it's all playoff mode. So you want to pick up a free month, first month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's easy. You get 25% off. Let me make sure that I clarify that. Gold Rush is the code. So that's the big thing that you want right here of everything that I just said. Use the code Gold Rush, one word, it's all caps, and you're going to get 25% off your first month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's for new Awesemo Plus users. So as you continue to be a deeper and larger member of our community, we continue to reward you, especially going from Awesemo Plus at $29.95, which is an amazing package each and every week, to Awesemo Plus Platinum, where you can use this promo code here, Gold Rush, one big word, all caps. It's only valid for another 5 days through May 20th. So stop guessing, start winning, and join Awesemo Plus Platinum today. I want to make sure that I clarify that so people aren't hitting the site of, Shander said it's free for the home. No. It's 25% is what you'll get. All right, we mentioned AD. We mentioned LeBron James, an early game for the Lakers in Indy. Sabonis is questionable. Everybody is questionable. If they're not out like Brogdon, then they're questionable across the board. I think you have to go down at least on DraftKings to hit Drummond, first guy that doesn't have a letter below his name. So let's start with a visiting team. We know the Lakers are playing. We know that they're trying to continue to play. LeBron, Anthony Davis, if healthy, will be out there, but there is a lot of money attached to both of them, Adam. How are we looking at least at the top of the Lakers on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they need to win this game. They've needed to win their last few games. Obviously they pulled it out against Houston by 2 points last time, but I'm kind of surprised LeBron hasn't come back yet. I'm assuming he comes back today, but really at this point, who knows? Same can be said for Anthony Davis, I guess. And so for now, I'm assuming that they're in. If they're in, it is a very, very good matchup against Indiana. They've been the second fastest team behind the Wizards over the last month. They haven't played very well defensively. LeBron, I assume, would be limited to some extent, but probably not like hard capped. Normally, when LeBron comes back from an injury, they kind of just like let LeBron do his thing. I think he played 31 or 32 minutes the last time he came back from a prolonged absence. I would assume you get something in there, which, again, we kind of put him as a little bit overpriced, not someone I'm really in love with here. Davis, not quite as high a ceiling with LeBron, but his average production hasn't really been hurt. I do think it's still a really good matchup for him. And then you have Schroeder back as well, which Schroeder's at a price point now where he was priced for LeBron to be out. So I think he's a little bit overpriced. But it also takes value away from these other guys we've been looking to, like Caruso, Horton Tucker, et cetera. So kind of a weird spot where if Davis and James do play, I think they both offer plenty of upside, but I think, it's kind of hard to love their salaries. If they were to sit and Schroeder plays, then I think Schroeder looks extremely good at 6,900 on DraftKings. I think it would make, Kuzma look a little bit better. I think Horton Tucker, Caruso would be risky, but still, reasonable options. And I think that Drummond looks better if they sit as well, because potentially, like if Davis were to sit, potentially it helps Drummond's minutes, but we also know that, the usage is there and increases if LeBron and Davis are out.
I'm just concerned about the trajectory, the direction, if you will, in which Anthony Davis has gone versus LeBron. It looks like LeBron comes off of a practice on Friday, listed as questionable today. Looks like it's at least moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, for the groin, and AD downgraded from probable to questionable. And I know, look, still a great chance that he can play through all of this. But I don't know how much you would factor that in, keeping an eye on the injury, Adam, but also the direction that in which it's gone, especially in Anthony Davis kind of going the wrong way. So even if he's out there, maybe it's more just getting him out there for a little bit, because I get it that they need to win these games. They need to win today, but Anthony Davis out and everybody else in, you may be able to justify keeping him healthy, resting him for the play-in opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, if he plays, I'm going to assume that he's healthy enough to play.
Okay.
I think your point about being downgraded, I think makes it less likely that he does play, but with it being a 1:00 game, we'll have that information. If he's in, I assume he's playing, his 30, playing 34, 35 minutes. I wouldn't assume he plays like 40. But the other reason that I'm kind of taking the Anthony Davis injury with a grain of salt, like, especially if he is ruled in today, is like he played 43 and a half minutes, including overtime against the Knicks 2 games ago on the front end of the back-to-back. Then they ruled him out for the second half against the Rockets. That ended up being a really close game, but that's a team that the Lakers should be able to beat with their bench. So, I think it could have just been a case of Davis was not feeling great. I think they said he was pretty sore, but, it also was kind of like a preemptive thing because, hey, we're playing the Rockets. We think we can get this win anyway. So if they rule him in today, I would assume that he's just feeling better and he's good to go.
All right, you mentioned THT, and just based off of him not being hurt, and you mentioned how risky he could be, but I wonder if that maybe mitigates the risk that he may be one of the few guys at least coming in, not playing through anything. I know Kuzma's probable right now, so far less of anything that's hanging or lingering with him, but I'm just curious if maybe being healthy impacts you a little more on this lineup.
It really depends who else is active, because it comes down to the minutes. Like if Davis, Schroeder, James, all sit, there's a ton of minutes available. Caruso's questionable too. There's a ton of minutes available for Horton Tucker. I mean, you go back to that Houston game. He started the game. He played 36.7 minutes. He's close to a fantasy point per minute guy. He would look very good. The issue is just like, if all those guys are in, where are the minutes coming from? Like, if you at this point, Horton Tucker is 5,200. You're not getting $3,600 Horton Tucker anymore. If he plays 22 minutes, he's not getting there outside of some unbelievably efficient game. So you really just like can't go there unless you are banking on multiple guys getting injured mid-game, which obviously I'm not. So it really just comes down to who's active. Like if Davis and LeBron are both out and Schroeder is in and Caruso's out, I think Horton Tucker still has a path to success. If Caruso and Schroeder are in, I think it's pretty hard for Horton Tucker to get there regardless of what Davis and James are doing, but it would at least be there would at least be a chance. If all those guys are in, it's just, I think, impossible to get there.
One more name, and I see him as far as the highest Laker, at least today, for Alex on the boom bust probability, Adam, and also I saw on the stream Devin mentioning his name as well. Andre Drummond, 6,600 on DraftKings. He comes off the 2010 in 22 minutes against Houston, granted, but still, where is Andre Drummond on your radar for this play?
I think he's a really risky option, but he does have a high ceiling. And again, he benefits if Davis is out, if LeBron's out. But the minutes are the concern. I mean, you saw the game against the Knicks where he played 30 minutes in regulation, but that was an anomaly. We haven't been seeing that from him. He's prior to that, I think he had played 26 minutes once in his last 10 games, and other than that, it was even less. And then he came right back out against the Rockets, played 22 minutes. The game was competitive. He wasn't in the closing lineup. They went with Montrezl Harrell there. So I think it's risky because more often than not, you're getting like 24 minutes from Andre Drummond. He's averaging about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute with the Lakers. But he's relatively expensive as well. So on average, he's kind of just mediocre for that salary. But the reason that I think he has, a high chance, or a relatively high chance rather, of being a good play in tournaments is that he can play 30 minutes. Like, it's not the most likely outcome, but the minutes are there. Like the remaining minutes are going to some combination of Montrezl Harrell and Marc Gasol. It's not impossible to see how in any given game Drummond just takes some of those minutes, and it is a very good matchup. So, if he for one reason or another gets 5 minutes more than average, he's likely to be a guy that kind of breaks the slate. So it's kind of unusual to get that sort of minutes volatility with players, especially at this point in the season when rotations are pretty much set out. So I think that's why the ceiling's so high. But on average, I think he's a little overpriced, which normally in situations like that, I just go back a little bit heavier to the ownership. Like, if players like that are getting a lot of ownership, I like going somewhere else and just hoping they play their average minutes and are relatively disappointing. If everyone's looking, shying away because if he plays 22 minutes, he's not going to be any good, then I like going there and hoping that I just kind of get lucky with his playing time.
This is also transitioning to the Pacers, but I wonder how much we know Miles Turner is out. Sabonis is questionable with that knee. So with the backdrop of what you just laid out with Drummond, does it change your opinion if Sabonis is out and now that front court is significantly weaker for Drummond?
Yes and no, because the front court, he'll just abuse the front court. But the problem is that if you're just getting even smaller, so it kind of turns into it makes it easier for Montrezl Harrell, for example, to pick up minutes. So it's kind of, you run into this a lot with centers. It's like a double-edged sword where it's like, oh, well, he's going to just abuse whoever he's out there with, but also they might just go small. So, and especially if Anthony Davis plays too, like Davis doesn't like playing the 5, but he's good at it and does it. So, that's another route that they could go. So I'm not going to really adjust how I view Drummond based on the Pacers front court, I don't think, because it kind of goes both ways.
Healthy Sabonis, we see 10-4 on DraftKings. I hope he's okay. He hasn't hit 70 fantasy points in the last 2 games, but we still know that this guy's on a monster tear when healthy. So approaching the injury as well as the matchup, how high is Sabonis on your radar for the slate today?
If he plays and we haven't, gotten word that he's going to be limited, I think he's the top pay-up option tonight, just based on playing time. The matchup, of course, isn't great. The Lakers don't play fast. They're a good defensive team. But we know Brogdon's out. LeVert's a game-time decision. We just got word that Aaron Holiday's out, which I don't think really matters a whole lot. But Sabonis has averaged 1.65 DraftKings points per minute in the games that he's played without Brogdon and without Miles Turner this year. That's more fantasy points per minute than LeBron averages. It's more than Davis averages. It's more than any of the Nets average when they're all healthy. And you can assume that Sabonis is playing like 40 minutes as long as he's not limited tonight. So that's more minutes than I assume Davis is going to play. It's more than I think LeBron's going to play. It's more than I think Harden's going to play. So you're just getting the guy that, even though it's a difficult matchup, he produces at a better rate given his circumstances, and he's most likely going to play the most minutes out of the group. So I think he stands out as a clear top option as long as he's healthy.
You mentioned the tempo and just kind of looking at this game from a broader standpoint, especially with the total. I'm seeing it here in Odd Shopper again is where we go, oddshopper.awesemo.com. Depending on what side you're at, right? If you're going to go over 224.5 up to 226. But the point being is that it's not a 218. It's not below that 221. It's a little over. And I wonder if just that is a smaller indication, at least, that the books believe the Pacers and their want to maybe push and score can prevail, as opposed to the Lakers, who would probably be more comfortable in a 212 to 214 total.
Yeah. So sorry, what was the question?
Just basically, if there is any indication from that, if you can extract anything from that, even if it's small, from that total, where at least we're seeing it a little higher than 221 at 224.5 to 226, as opposed to like if we saw that total at 217, Adam, I think that would be a stronger indication that the books believe the Lakers tempo and that lower scoring game would prevail. And maybe that would be a deterrent for a guy like Sabonis on the Pacers, where they would want to score and run a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really hard to play low-scoring games against the Pacers at this point. Like, they're averaging 105 possessions per game over the last month, just behind the Wizards. They also don't play defense. So, as the thing is, like, this is a relatively low total for the Pacers. This is a team where when they were playing the Wizards, they had 244 point totals. So, 227 for the Pacers is relatively low.
All right. So before we move on now and hit our third game, we talked about kind of at the top and some other guys who we know are out, from Holiday recently to Turner already. And Karis LeVert comes in with the Q tag. Is there any interest at all at price at 8,900, at least on DraftKings? I don't know if that's too much for you to stay away.
Yeah, I think it's a good tournament play. I don't feel quite as confident in him as Sabonis, but he's still averaged about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in those games with Sabonis and without Brogdon. He's been playing more minutes lately. I think you get 36, 37 minutes from him here. If Sabonis sits, LeVert looks even better because he's just going to have to do everything. Sabonis has like a 35% assist percentage in this game. So if you take him out, you're getting even more ball handling responsibilities for Karis LeVert. So he would look even better. But if we assume Sabonis is in and LeVert's in, I still think you can look to LeVert in tournaments. I don't think he's a priority like Sabonis is, but still, clearly a very high upside play.
All right, and I imagine that McDermott, Goga, these guys are, if you can work them in, maybe, but probably more stay away.
Yeah, and it obviously depends on who's healthy as well.
Right.
You got 24 minutes from Goga last game. Of course, Sabonis was out for some of the second half, but I think it is actually kind of nice. You got like 11 minutes in the first half from Goga. He's another one kind of like Claxton, where at his price point, he's down at 3,400 on DraftKings. If you got 23 or 24 minutes from Goga, I think that he ends up being a good play. I think that he also, I was thinking Brissett was out, but he's not. So I think if that happens, he ends up being a good play, but there's no guarantee it happens. So kind of risky, but a reasonable value to look to. If LeVert's out, I think you can go right back to TJ McConnell. We saw him start like 44.5 minutes last game. That's the third time this year we've seen him start and just play massive minutes in those starts. So if he, for one reason or another, most likely LeVert being out, finds his way into the starting lineup today, I think you can pretty confidently go to TJ McConnell.
Knicks hosting Charlotte and teams playing for positioning. So clearly there's a lot on the line here. And looking again, everything here at oddshopper.awesemo.com, the place to get everything from point spreads, totals, money line plays, all the player props as well. It's the one-stop shop for a reason, because they do all the work and make sure that they'll give you the best odds. Look out there, you can see across the board different books depending on where you are, right through our best bets on Odd Shopper. So again, a low total, and I understand that because it's the Knicks and they're at home, but you start to look at some cost here for guys, and we can start with the road team, of course, with Charlotte, Adam, and just looking at Ball right there at the top. And we've talked a little bit about Rozier as well, but let's start with LaMelo as far as where he is especially versus other guys on the slate who are at that price range. And again, I see 8,400 for DraftKings. So I wonder if that might actually be cheap or right on the money as far as a price point.
I think it's pretty much where it should be. The matchup certainly isn't very good. I mean, the Knicks have been one of the most efficient defensive teams and one of the slowest teams all season long. The Hornets come into this game with about a 103-point implied total. And LaMelo's minutes still haven't really gotten back to where they were prior to his injury. He did play 31 and a half minutes against the Clippers last game, and he left a few minutes on the table because he didn't come back at the end of the fourth quarter for his final stint. But, I still think you're probably looking at like 33, 34 minutes in that game as opposed to like the 38 that we were getting from him at times prior to his injury. So the combination of matchup and the fact that you can't really project him for more than 32 minutes at this point makes it really hard to really like him at that price. But, of course, it is LaMelo Ball. He can just go out there and throw up a monster game. The same kind of goes for Terry Rozier. Like, he's playing huge minutes. He's obviously not as productive on a per minute basis as Ball is. But you're likely to get, 38 minutes if this game's competitive. The matchup still sucks, though. So it kind of just makes Rozier another guy where, if he ends up getting into my lineup as a final piece, I think it's fine. He's going to play huge minutes. He's a fantasy point per minute guy. But I'm not really, starting my lineup out by saying, like, oh, let me go to Terry Rozier against the Knicks.
Fair enough. And I wonder, as we've seen the price kind of fluctuate, right? Mid 7,000s, really up to 8,000, 3 of the last 4 games. If it's just dropped now for Rozier simply because of the lack of return, and maybe somebody would look at that and say, oh, okay, that's really good value. Let me jump on Rozier. But it seems like even that would be a deterrent for you, where this is more like a last case scenario.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Okay, fair enough. Now, outside of that, if we start to look, and I saw earlier on the stream question about Bridges as well. Is Miles Bridges 7,200? We have Washington as well, kind of that similar price point on DraftKings, where if there's any opportunity to take advantage of this matchup where the expectation is that you're running into a defensive buzzsaw, especially because the Knicks are at home.
Yeah, Bridges coming back, I think, makes it really difficult for me to get to anything else from Charlotte beyond Ball and Rozier. PJ Washington's been playing huge minutes lately, and that could continue. Like, you could, he played 34 in the blowout last game. He was on his way to another 38 or so. You could see that again, if like they were just to remove Cody Zeller from the rotation, for example, and or remove Biyombo, one or the two, and basically make PJ Washington the center. You could still see big minutes there, but you're still paying for those minutes, so it's not even like he's at a great price tag. But Bridges coming back adds risk to that too, because it's adding another body to the rotation that plays a lot of minutes. But Bridges is expensive enough that I don't really see going to him. So it makes it really tough. I think like it makes McDaniels less appealing. It makes Martin less appealing. It makes Zeller riskier. Potentially takes minutes away from Monk. It's just I think another body here that can play a lot of minutes in an unappealing matchup is something that typically just makes the whole team not look very good.
Saw Isaac on the stream throw him out there, and it's just. I don't know at 4,000 if there is anything appealing or worth playing Nerlens Noel today at 4,000 against Charlotte.
If no real value opens up, I mean, I can see like kind of getting there. Like, you're typically going to get 28 or so minutes from him. But he's not a very good fantasy producer on a per minute basis. Played 24 minutes against the Lakers. In his last, or sorry, not his last game, a couple games ago, in his last game against San Antonio, played 26 and a half minutes. I mean, like, you're typically just getting in that price range. So if you love the rest of your lineup, you need a 4K guy, sure, Nerlens Noel works, but it's not a price point that I'm overly excited about.
Would Zeller be in the same scenario if you were looking at either one of those to kind of fill that last slot at a 4K player? Would Zeller be a better play?
My concern with Zeller is Bridges coming back. I don't know how that rotation is going to look. Zeller's been getting minutes lately because basically him and Biyombo have been playing all the center minutes, and PJ Washington's been playing at the 4. But with Bridges coming back, he's going to get, I would assume, a nice chunk of minutes at the 4, which is going to let PJ Washington get some minutes at the 5. You could very realistically just see a rotation where Bismack Biyombo starts and PJ Washington's the backup center and Cody Zeller loses all of his minutes. Not saying that necessarily is what happens, but it's definitely on the table here. I think if I'm going value center and looking to take a risk on something, I think I would rather just go all the way to Claxton or Batadze and upgrade somewhere else in my lineup while I'm at it.
I see that LeBron is officially, looks like, in today, so we can circle back on that. But just as far as the Knicks are concerned, clearly Julius Randle is going to be up there at the top. But I just wonder as far as, and I know they're at different spots, but I wonder as far as value versus return, if a guy like RJ Barrett might be, if not a better play, but an equal play.
I think Barrett's okay. I think Randall's better. The reason is like Barrett plays, plenty of minutes, but Randall plays more. Randall's coming off the game. He just played 45 minutes. He played the entire second half of the game against the Spurs. He's second over the last month, I believe, to Russell Westbrook in minutes per game, and he averages 1.3 DraftKings points per minute. Barrett averages about 0.85 or so fantasy points per minute this year. Of course, he's less expensive than Randall and does give you a lot of minutes for his price tag, and especially his position as well. But I think Randall, you've seen the salary come down a little bit. He's at 9,700 on DraftKings. He had been up over 10K not that long ago. It's not a bad matchup here against Charlotte. And it's also, a slate where it feels like Randall's been on a lot of slates lately where you have Westbrook, you have Giannis, you have Jokic, you have so many guys that are like $1,000 more expensive and just better than him. On this slate, you don't have that quite as much. We kind of have already talked about the litany of question marks that surround a lot of these 10K guys tonight. I think it's gonna make it a little bit easier to get Julius Randle into your lineups, knowing that the Knicks want to win this game. Julius Randle is going to play massive minutes, and Julius Randle produces, consistently at a very high rate.
So just looking at the rest of the slate for the point guard position, I know that there are going to be better options as far as cost and return right there at the top, and it's a shame because the injuries, I don't know how much the ankle injury derails Derrick Rose, but the guy was on a mini tear and great performances. And I wonder if he's playing, listed as questionable, but if he's playing at 6,300 on DraftKings with this matchup, if it's worth it building around and spending elsewhere.
So my concern with Rose, if he plays, is that in those games where he was getting a bunch of minutes and putting up big games, Alec Burks wasn't playing. And Burks is someone who kind of goes under the radar, I think. But if you look at playing time for guys with and without Burks, like for the season, RJ Barrett loses minutes. Derrick Rose averages 30 minutes per game without Burks, 25 minutes per game with Burks. Not saying that I think Rose necessarily at this point in the season goes back to 25 minutes, but I think it's more likely you get like 28 minutes from Rose than the 33 or 34 that you were seeing. So that combined with the elevated price tag, I think makes it pretty tough to get there. One thing to note on Rose, though, Alec Burks came back and played 34 minutes last game with Rose out. Burks is 3,900 on DraftKings. If Rose sits, I think Burks ends up being a really good value.
All right, so just wanted to circle back now with this news in about LeBron James. He is playing. We talked about the possibilities of, or if not, just looking at he and AD. So first, it's kind of two things, right? Let's look at it this first, Adam, as far as where you're playing him, how often you're playing him, knowing that he's in at 10-3 on DraftKings, and also the value for guys like THT and anybody below, knowing that LeBron is in. And we can assume in this game of value, if LeBron's out there, he's going to play a lot of minutes.
Yeah, so I think basically we got everybody ruled in. We got Caruso in, we got Schroeder in, we got James in, we got Davis in. So from a DFS standpoint, what was that?
I said beautiful. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so from a DFS standpoint, it is as unappealing a spot as the Lakers could be in because now they just have all their bodies basically. Schroeder has played 24 games with LeBron and with Davis. He's averaged 0.83 DraftKings points per minute. So I think it's tough to get to him on DraftKings at 6,900. 6K on Fanduel is okay, but still not overly excited about it. Davis and James, I think, are basically where the focus is going to be. My guess is that you're getting around 30 to 32 minutes from James. I haven't seen that confirmed anywhere. It's just kind of how he's been handled in the past. Plus the fact that he's, been practicing and kind of they thought he was going to come back a couple games ago and then he sat out and then he did it again the next day. It kind of just feels like he was waiting until he was, he was definitely good to come back. So I think you're getting, maybe not 36 to 38 from James, but relatively close to his normal minutes here, which makes him, look okay here. And then Davis, I assume is playing his normal minutes. He only missed the one game. And like I said before, I'm not convinced he was legitimately hurt for that game. I think it might've just been more, preventative measures or preemptive, resting. And 1.34 DraftKings points per minute with LeBron this year, 33 minutes per game. I think there's a pretty good chance you get more than 33 minutes here. So I think out of the I think I like Davis a little bit more than LeBron just because I think he plays a couple more minutes. But I think that Davis and James are the two most appealing options from the Lakers.
All right, so I saw in the chat, just trying to confirm this here, Levine out looks like, and that could impact, right, what we talked about game one with Chicago in Brooklyn. And assuming that's the case now, how does that factor in? I don't know if Kobe White or anyone else becomes a more desirable play, or maybe based on just the matchup and cost on the team, Adam, this really doesn't impact what you would do with that squad in Chicago.
Well, we got Satoransky out too. So
okay, nice.
So like the last time that the Bulls played, Satoransky and Levine combined for 54.2 minutes. So you just took almost 55 minutes out of the Bulls lineup. So Kobe White played 42 minutes in that game. So you can't really give more minutes to Kobe White. He probably produces at a higher rate, but it's not going to really affect his playing time. Garrett Temple played 27 minutes. I think so. I mean, it solidifies Temple's playing time. It potentially, the one guy I'm looking at here who didn't play a whole lot in that game, who you would expect to, Patrick Williams played 18.3 minutes. I think that he looks pretty interesting now because you're opening up minutes for, you're opening up a bunch of minutes. Williams can play multiple positions, but he's also, like, if you think about what a team like the Bulls wants to get out of a meaningless game, the first thing that you would logically think of is you want to get your young guys playing time. And so that bodes well for Kobe White. It bodes well for Patrick Williams, who's $3,700, who sees an uptick in usage without Zach LaVine, who can defend multiple positions. So it's easy for him to be on the floor in a variety of lineups. And he's only $3,700 on DraftKings. So I actually think Patrick Williams ends up looking like a good value now.
How does this, real quick, I'm just curious, how does this impact Vooch, if at all, where we know LaVine's out?
So I think, you would expect the production to go up. He played 10 games with the Bulls without LaVine, 1.41 DraftKings points per minute. So his production actually didn't go up, but it's one of those where, it's only 10 games. At the very least, he's not going to be worse. You would expect him to produce similarly to how he did with the Magic, which is around about the same as he's been with the Bulls, like 1.4 to 1.5 points per minute. So I don't think it necessarily is a benefit for Vooch. I definitely don't think it's a detriment, though. The only thing that makes me somewhat concerned is, does this mean that Vooch is going to play but not play his, full rotation? If there is LaVine actually like playing through a knee injury and they're just like, okay, you're done now, or is it just like, yeah, we don't really care, we're going to rest LaVine? But assuming Vooch plays, my inclination would be that he's still going to play 33, 34 minutes. And even if the average production doesn't change, I think the ceiling gets a little bit higher just because there's more touches to go around.
Man, I hope for anybody running him that they're in this game at the half and they're not down 20 points heading into the third. And it's like, all right, big man, you could take a rest now for the final second half by all means. So
Patrick Williams is the one I keep going back to.
That's the play.
Like
especially for cost, right?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like saying Patrick Williams is the play isn't something that ever feels really good.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean as far as like the top play on the slate.
Right. 100% Patrick Williams go. But like
it's all Williams today.
Right. But like it just makes sense. There's more minutes to go around. There's more usage to go around. There's a bunch of guys on the Nets for him to defend. This is someone who that's his calling card in the NBA right now. And he's 3,700, so I think, and he's young, and he's the kind of guy that the Bulls should want to play. Like you can look at almost every player on the Bulls and pretty easily say, yeah, well, what if they just let him take it easy in the second half? Patrick Williams is one of the only guys where it's just like, why would they do that? Like they should want him to play a bunch in the second half.
We got to remind you, of course, about how you can continue to get free stuff, and all you need to do in this case is be part of the Awesemo Hall of Fame. It's easy. You want to download the Awesemo profile pic from awesemo.com/avatar, because we know you're out there winning tournaments. We know you're out there winning cash. We know you're out there just at the top of all of the rankings following the next day. So you might as well brag about it. You might as well get something for it. So once you place in a top 3 of any contest with over 5,000 contestants, which is easy, especially to win or place in that. We see you do it all the time. Tweet those wins at Awesemo HOF. That's the account at Awesemo HOF, and you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum and you just continue to see all of the amazing wins and victories, gigantic victories by all of the people, all of you out there who help make up the Awesemo community. So continue to win, listen, subscribe, share, like, all the other ways in which you can catch information. You want to be a part of Awesemo, but you want to be part of Awesemo Plus, Awesemo Plus Platinum, and you can see that members of our community, it's paying off. Literally, it's paying to be a part of this community, to pay attention to Adam, to use the tools that Alex has online for you. And if that's not proof right there, running through all of these wins and seeing the Awesemo profile picks, I don't know what is, to be honest with you. So again, download the pick, awesemo.com/avatar. Tweet us your wins at Awesemo HOF. Geez, that Sixers win really did a lot to me last night, man. And you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. We've got 2 more games, news as it keeps coming out. I see a couple of questions we can throw out Adam as well on the stream if there's time. But let's move to Phoenix and the Spurs in San Antonio. Again, Phoenix knowing that not totally locked in as of yet. So we see Booker at 8,500 on DraftKings, Chris Paul right below him. Is there a play here to maybe run that backcourt in its entirety?
I think it's going to be a little bit easier to get to them than it normally is, just because it's a smaller slate, and we do know that they should play, normal minutes here. But still, I think at price points where it's more of like a luxury, I guess, than a necessity. Chris Paul can score a lot of points, so can Devin Booker. We know that. But they are also priced up, with Booker at 8,500 on DraftKings, Paul at 8,200. So I wouldn't say either one's a priority, but I think, for example, I would lean slightly towards Devin Booker over LaMelo Ball, just based on how many minutes they're expected to play.
As far as Paul is concerned, and knowing at 8,200, could you work anything there as opposed to, like, if it was one or the other? Where would be the argument to run with Paul over Booker, if there is one? Yeah, I don't want to have you make something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think I would go Booker just because he's likely to play a few more minutes than Paul. But the case for Paul would just be that he's still, if you're just talking about Devin Booker and Chris Paul, even though Chris Paul projects a little bit lower, he's still going to beat Devin Booker 45% of the time or something. And he's also $300 less expensive, which sometimes, even though it's not a lot, does make a difference in your lineup. So it's one of those where, if I have 8,500 and it's my last spot, I'll just go Booker. If I have 8,200, I'm not going to rearrange everything to get from Paul to Booker, even though I like Booker a little bit more.
Cheaper prices, at least as far as compared to the rest of the slate per position, right? With Bridges at the 3 and DeAndre down low at the 5. So, you look at 6,800 for DeAndre, Bridges at 5,800 on DraftKings, and knowing at least that DeAndre has one Q tag that he'd play through. Is there anything, just because of the price point, to kind of compare with ownership, where either of these guys may jump out, even if it's a sneak or more of a contrarian play?
Yeah, I think that Mikal Bridges, the number of minutes that this guy plays, becomes useful on a slate like this, because there's just not as much value as we've had on some of these bigger slates. And so, knowing that you're going to get 36 to 40 minutes from Mikal Bridges, even though he's not a great fantasy producer, those minutes at that price tag are pretty valuable. So he's certainly someone that can fit into lineups. One thing to pay attention to, so you mentioned the Q tag for DeAndre Ayton. Yeah. He sat last game and you got 30 minutes for Dario Saric. Ayton, I think if he probably plays 30 to 32 minutes, and he's fine at 6,800. If he sits, though, Dario Saric is $3,100, and he's actually a productive player. So, if you get even remotely close to 30 minutes from him at 3,100, he's going to end up being a good value. And then one other thing from the rotation last game, which was kind of unusual, is Cameron Payne played a bunch of minutes alongside Chris Paul. We've seen Payne be really productive this year when he's gotten opportunities, but typically he's played almost all of his minutes with Paul on the bench, which kind of limits, how many minutes you can project him for. But he played 27 minutes in that game. Part of that could have been just a trickle-down effect of Ayton being out, but I don't really think it was, because all of the center minutes went to Kaminsky and went to Saric, or almost all the center minutes. So, I think there's a chance you get 22 to 24 minutes from Payne tonight, which would make him a pretty decent value at 3,900.
On the flip side here, you right there at the top of Alex's boom bust, we have just below number 2, Drew Eubanks. Now he's going to be a really super low option and heavily owned but a low cost option, sorry, but heavily owned. So we can start from the bottom with the Spurs and work our way back up. Eubanks, though, at a 52% on the boom probability, is that somebody that, despite 44% ownership, is a roll here?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first team we've gotten to where there's just like a lot of value. DeRozan's out, Pirtle's out, White is out, DeJounte Murray's questionable, Rudy Gay is questionable. Eubanks has started 2 games this year. He's averaged 24.5 minutes per game, 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. Overall this season, he's been a productive, fantasy producer when he's gotten minutes. He's averaged 1.04 DraftKings points per minute. So at essentially minimum salary, the reward just so greatly outweighs the risk.
So I guess the pivot there would be Dang at that point.
Yeah. So you did see that. I think it might've been the last game that Pirtle was out. Was everyone played Eubanks, and Gorgie Jang got a bunch of minutes off the bench, played really, really well. Jang is certainly someone that you can go to as well. I'm trying to pull up now to see what date that game was so that I can see exactly how many minutes he played.
But, I got it for you. You're talking about the last, what is it, against Brooklyn? Was this against Utah?
The last game that Jakob Poeltl was out. So against Philly
Philly, yeah. So yeah, Jang had 31 minutes.
Yeah. So that's obviously that's in the range of outcomes there. I'm looking to see how much he played alongside Eubanks, because that would matter a lot as far as like rostering them together.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how aggressive would that play be to roster both of them tonight?
Yeah. So that game went to overtime. So they basically played. They played 48 minutes. Jang played 26.5 minutes in regulation. Eubanks played 21.5. You can play them together because there's only 5 games and because they are both minimum salary. So it's still not my favorite thing to do because, obviously your upside is somewhat capped, but you're still basically spending $6,000 and 2 roster positions for 48 minutes of center. And the other thing is that Jang and Eubanks are both productive per minute guys. So if they were to split it like 24-24, there's a pretty good chance that they both give you 7 to 8 extra salary, which is fine. So yeah, I think it's fine to do. I don't, it's not my favorite thing. I would like to find an alternative, but as long as it makes the rest of your lineup look good, playing those guys together, I think it's actually fine at their prices.
We have one more game, and speaking of which, as you heard Adam say, we finally reached that point of deep value. We're going to find it again, at least with one of these teams before we get out of here. Another reminder, though, about this fantastic giveaway that we have. It's a great opportunity for all new Awesemo Plus users to get 25% off an Awesemo Plus Platinum subscription. So we want you to go from Awesemo Plus to Awesemo Plus Platinum and get everything that's available to you across the board here on Awesemo.com. As you see, you can get access to everything that's happening postseason, UFC. I know, Adam, you're locked into that tonight, right?
Yeah, MMA finals tonight.
You've got the PGA, US Open, everything going on that you can put up a DFS lineup. You want to make sure that you are part of the Awesemo Plus, the Awesemo Plus Platinum community, and all you need to do is use our promo code GOLDRUSH, one big word, all caps, and you get 25% off Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's only valid through May 20th, so you have about 5 days left, including today. You better jump in, take advantage of this. As you see, we are right in that meat of the year where everything's going on, and there are tons of ways to make a lot of money. So Boston is, Adam, we know, dealing with the Jaylen Brown injury, life without Jaylen. Tatum comes in questionable with the ankle. So let's start with Boston before we really look deep in mine with Minnesota. Assuming that, we won't really know about Jason Tatum, how do we approach Tatum first and foremost with the Celtics?
I'm not planning on going to Tatum here. Obviously if he plays, he's going to produce at a high rate for whatever minutes he's on the floor. But Boston, they're in the 7th seed. They're 4 games behind the Knicks. So they're not getting the 6. They're 2 up on the Hornets and the Pacers. So they're pretty much they're there. It would be weird if Tatum played a bunch of minutes tonight. I don't really see why he would. So he's the same price as Julius Randle. Just take your 40 minutes from Julius Randle and move on, I think.
All right. So let's assume that either limited or maybe out, depending on the scenario here or how bad it is or how much they want him rested. Where else is there an opportunity? I mean, we know that Smart, Walker, a lot of guys are out for Boston, so I don't know how deep you'd like to dive in here for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of minutes available, a ton of usage available. You had Aaron Naismith played 22 minutes as a starter last game. Peyton Pritchard played 26 minutes. The thing that you're mostly going to want to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out the Boston team here is you want to think about per minute fantasy production that we've seen this season. It's always really difficult to be really accurate with projecting how usage and everything is going to go in these games. But we know that Peyton Pritchard, when given an opportunity, has been relatively productive this year. Tremont Waters has been a very productive per minute fantasy player. He played 23 minutes last game, and you would assume plays more if the Celtics rest guys here. Whereas, guys like Romeo Langford's not been a very good fantasy producer. Grant Williams is like a 0.65 guy. Same with Semi Ojeleye. They can still offer value because they're minimum salary and potentially playing a lot of minutes. So they're still, guys that you can look at, but they're not quite as appealing as, your Peyton Pritchards or Tremont Waters or even Aaron Naismiths.
Any real concern factoring in here that Boston is nearly a 6-point dog on the road in Minnesota? And I get it that they're a lot of guys are out, but I don't know how telling that would be just as far as their ability to even keep up with Minnesota.
It's not really a concern because I don't think they're going to play guys that they care. They're not going to start. They're not going to play Tremont Waters and then the game be out of hand and they're like, okay, we need to rest Tremont Waters.
Right.
So I'm fully expecting them to give the bulk of the minutes to guys that would play in garbage time. So I don't think there's much of a concern as far as that goes.
So on that same vein, does Carson Edwards now become appealing in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot will depend on the starting lineup here, which is clearly up in the air since we don't even know for sure that they're going to rest guys, and Brad Stevens changes it, daily. But Carson Edwards, played 4.5 minutes last game, so he was behind Waters, he was behind Naismith, he was behind Langford in the rotation, behind Pritchard, behind Williams. But if you were to take out, like if you were to say, Tatum doesn't play, Fournier doesn't play, then there's a bunch more minutes available where Edwards is, if he's coming off the bench, he's a risky option you can use in tournaments as a pivot away from Waters or whoever is starting. If Edwards starts, then you can be a little bit more confident in his minutes.
All right, we've got 3 guys that jump out right there at the top for Minnesota. We can start with Towns, as he's clearly the heaviest priced Timberwolf tonight. And just today, looking at Towns kind of comparatively, Vooch, other guys on the slate that may be a better option. Where's Towns rank?
Yeah, I think he's actually a really good play tonight, which I kind of feel like he hasn't been like a strong option in a while just because normally the center position's so loaded, but it's not tonight. We saw Towns play 39 minutes last game. Minnesota doesn't appear to be interested in losing. Last game you got 39 from Towns, you got 36 minutes from D'Angelo Russell. So as of that game, at least they were still going for it. I don't really see any indications that they're not going to play their guys here. So Towns has averaged about 1.5 fantasy points per minute this year. If you're assuming he plays at least 34 minutes with the upside for more, he looks like a pretty solid option at 10-1 because that's similar production to what you're getting from James and Davis on a per minute basis. It's similar playing time, if not more. The only guy, in that price range that, again, if he plays, I would feel better about is Domantas Sabonis.
So let's start with D'Angelo Russell. We can end with Edwards here. Russell at 8,000. I guess if you're going to get at least 30 minutes, if you can predict at least 30 minutes from Russell, he looks like a pretty good play on the surface, I think, Adam.
Yeah, it just kind of comes down to what the rest of your lineup looks like. I don't really have any issue with him at his price tag. You got 36 minutes last game, like I said, which is really good to see. Typically, you can count on like 33 or 34. He's averaged about 1.2 Draftkings points per minute this year, and going up against a shorthanded Boston team, certainly not a bad matchup. So I think Russell pretty much priced where he should be, but does give you a nice ceiling. I feel the same way about Anthony Edwards. Certainly can light it up, but he's priced where he should be because he's been in this situation where he's playing a lot of minutes at, with a high usage rate for a while now. The one other piece I would point out for Minnesota, looking at their rotation last game, is Naz Reid has kind of like come and gone as a fantasy option at times this year because he's a very good per minute producer, but he's been stuck behind Karl Anthony Towns in the rotation. There was a time where Minnesota said they wanted to play him alongside Towns more. They briefly did, then they stopped. In the last game, he played 30.8 minutes in a game where Towns played 39. Reed started the second half alongside Towns. He closed the game alongside Towns. If he starts tonight, he looks like a great value at 4,300.
We mentioned him. Anything on Hernan Gomez on the way out, just as another maybe possible lower cost play, realizing that Boston's going to be down to fumes as well when it comes to players?
I have trouble getting so the number of minutes Naz Reid played last game makes me a little concerned for Hernan Gomez.
Got it.
Because he only played 16 minutes. He's someone that had been playing those minutes. Like you had seen, Vanderbilt getting some of those minutes. You've seen Hernan Gomez getting some of those minutes. You've seen Jaden McDaniels getting some of those minutes. Last game, they just like all went to Naz Reid. So again, that doesn't mean it's going to happen tonight, but it would make sense because Reid is a potential piece of Minnesota's future where, if they can figure out how to make him work with Towns, it would benefit them. So it wouldn't be surprising if you see another Naz Reid start in just a lot of minutes, I think.
Only 5 games, but we jammed a lot in this hour. Everybody is fully prepared. Thank Adam. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. I'm at Shander Show. We thank you for riding with us, paying attention, interacting. Thanks, Chris, for producing. It's another Awesemo NBA Deeper Dive, and good luck.
This is going to be like nothing, though. After Eric and I did 2 hours yesterday, we talked 55 minutes about these games like nothing.
Yeah, that slate was... I went heavy on that slate, and let's just say the results were not my favorite.
Are you doing shows tomorrow?
No, thank God.
All right, last one.
I know.
The regular season, anyway. For me also.
It's 15 games tomorrow? No, thanks.
I could hear us in the background, by the way, Chris. I don't know if that's... Oh, okay. All right, cool.
It's nice because I get to hear double the Greg. That's always what I wanted.
Yeah. I'd rather jump off a bridge. There's nothing worse than hearing your own voice.
I've heard mine enough now where I feel like, because I actually listen back to some episodes, like Splash Play, especially in the beginning. I used to listen to those because I love laughing at myself really more than anything. But I've grown accustomed to it enough. But I think if you force yourself to, it becomes like a Clockwork Orange where you're just gonna pick yourself apart.
Yeah, that was the worst part about doing comedy, was having to listen back to some of my own things and then trying to figure like, oh, here's where people laughed, here's where people didn't laugh. And you realize like, oh, this bomb's so much worse than I thought it did. And then it's also like me talking through it. It's like, the whole process is miserable.
You got to build up a callus for sure. Shout out to the projections being lightning fast today.
I think it's a little easier with it just being 5 games.
Yeah. And the Spurs injury, I think, or those guys getting rolled out, they've had it enough times.
Actually, I would have preferred if the Spurs guys got ruled out later because I was already expecting them to not play.
I thought they might trot out Murray like they seem to be trotting out Tatum, where he'll get like probably a half or a little bit more than that, and that'll be it. But no surprise. Yep.
Sure.
That's it. What is up, guys? It is time for that final hour, the final 55 minutes really here before we lock on the Saturday, second to last day of the NBA regular season. And we are here for you guys to sacrifice our own profitability in the name of covering this as best we can for you all out there. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man who is well equipped to handle me in the early morning here on the West Coast. He is nerd-ass Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, well, I mean, at least we have a good starting point, right? We could just jump into talking about the Spurs, who just ruled out DeJounte Murray and Rudy Gay. And then other than that, the next hour will just take us wherever it takes us, because this is a slate that I think even more uncertainty than there was yesterday, because I really don't know. Even these teams are playing like LeBron, Anthony Davis, the Lakers could use a win here. They'd still have a slight chance of making it out of the play-in game, but I don't know what their injury situation. Are they going to be willing to play guys, 40 minutes? Probably not, but are they going to be 25, 28? There's a whole lot of variance here.
Yeah, we got 3 games that'll be locking coming up in 55 minutes, so we should get some news, hopefully for Indiana in particular soon. Game time decisions for Caris LeVert and Domantas Sabonis as well. But as Greg mentioned, we got some other news that we got to talk about. But here's one bit of news that you should be hearing about right now, because if you are tilting up over the NBA DFS season ending, and I know I saw some people in chat earlier this morning, actually, during the deeper dive, who were upset about guys like Marcus Morris not playing the second half, all of that. Good news for you guys out there. The DFS principles that you have learned in the NBA, you can port them over to other sports, and Awesemo has given you a great way to do that today with the promo code GOLDRUSH. Nearly every DFS sport this season and the NBA and NHL are heading into the playoffs. So it's a great time to be a DFS player, and you can pick up your first month of Awesemo Plus Platinum for 25% off when you use that promo code GOLDRUSH. That's promo code GOLDRUSH, one word, all caps. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, the premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. Top stacks tool, top pitcher tool for MLB are crucial, so don't miss this one. The offer is valid through May 20th. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. And Greg, I'm sure you're getting in on the Gold Rush. It's going to be the MMA coming up later today. UFC has a big show going on. Michael Chandler, I think, surprising underdog in that one, but we have some content coming up for that as well. Our boy Jason Floyd actually doing double duty today, doing a NASCAR strategy show in addition to the UFC Live Before Lock with our pal Josh Engelman. So tune into that stuff. The UFC show in particular coming up at 5 p.m. Eastern, and that is a big card tonight. So maybe worth getting one lineup in if you're going to watch the UFC show. But Greg, let's get into the slate. You mentioned up top, we got Rudy Gay and also DeJounte Murray joining the rest of the Spurs. We're going to be out. Core rotational pieces going to be out, really all of them for the most part today. And what does that change for you with San Antonio? Already looked to me like a heavy Drew Eubanks day. And I guess now you can make a better case to get guys like Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Lonnie Walker in the mix.
Yeah, so let's go over. Here's the list of players who are going to be active for the San Antonio Spurs today. We have Drew Eubanks, Keldon Johnson, Gorgui Dieng, Lonnie Walker, Patty Mills, Devin Vassell, Keita Bates-Diop, Trey Jones, and Quandre Witherspoon. So not very many healthy bodies there. And at the very least, I want to load up really heavily on the Spurs. It is a game that starts at 2. That is the last start time of the slate. I don't know exactly which guys I'm going to be getting to. It's going to depend on the starting lineup. As of right now, I suspect it's going to be a lot of Eubanks for me, Gorgui Dieng, Patty Mills, I think will be in there, Devin Vassell. You mentioned Trey Jones. So I'm mixing a lot of these guys into my lineups right now. And then the priorities are going to be whoever starts. Because here's something we've seen a lot over the last couple of slates. You want to prioritize the cheap guys that are in the starting lineup, or just anybody who's in the starting lineup. Because when people come off the bench, whether it be a Chris Boucher or Gary Trent, that type of thing, all bets are off the table whether those guys will even enter the game. So to me, I just want to prioritize whoever ends up starting.
Yeah, that was something that we definitely talked about a lot on the tip-off yesterday. It's something that I think is one of the key parts of these last few days. And the Gary Trent and Chris Boucher ones, I like Nick Nurse a lot as the coach. I don't get why all of a sudden he decided I'm going to thumb my nose at everybody and be really evasive, talking about, like, even yesterday he mentioned, well, Gary Trent and Chris Boucher can play, and then gave a little sly smirk to the camera, to the reporters in that one. And it's it's a spot where these teams where they can be a little bit evasive more than usual. Even coaches who I think for the most part have been predictable predictable. And I would say Nick Nurse is one of those guys. So just keep that in mind today. And as Greg mentioned, watch out for the starters. Are going to be coming. A lot of news here, including after the show here. We're probably getting a few lineups that are going to be surprises. Yesterday, a lot of people didn't know Jay Scrubb to be starting. I think that was one that a few of us picked up on early, but lots of guys that are going to be surprises to you. So just make sure you're paying close attention to that news as it comes through. Our news guide and the premium Slack can be the best way for you guys to get that as well. But I guess, Greg, which priorities for the Spurs stand out? Because Eubanks, to me, I think is a guy we've seen actually this exact situation against Phoenix before. Weirdly, the Spurs have done this exact same resting pattern against Phoenix previously. Eubanks had one of the better games out there. And we have seen spots, though, where Gorgie Jang has taken some minutes away. Eubanks, though, certainly more of a prospect they have a future capital invested in. And I think just the actual time spent, whereas Jang, certainly a journeyman who doesn't have the same investment level in the Spurs. But how are you prioritizing these guys? Because to me, Eubanks is one of very few core plays that I have a good amount of trust for today.
Yeah, and so I was kind of looking at the Spurs earlier, and I was thinking like, hey, Gorgie Jang, that's a really good pivot play off of Drew Eubanks. But I mean, right now we only have Eubanks projected for 28% ownership, and that still does make him the most popular value play on the slate. But given the other options that we have here and how well I have him projected, I don't think that's nearly enough ownership. So I thought that Gorgie Jang, that he could be a really good pivot play, and I'm still going to get exposure to Gorgie Jang, but I don't see any issue with just having Drew Eubanks massively overweight to the field and making him a core play, because he's somebody to me that should be like 50 to 60% on the slate, and that's just not how we're projecting it right now.
Another play that's popping up very heavily on the boom bust tool, which is one of those things that I think you have to sort of decide how it works with your lineup constructions, because Trey Jones is a player that looks like he'll have a 73.5% chance of booming. And that boom bust tool here, obviously the NBA season is wrapping up for the regular season, but that tool will continue to be updated for the big slates going through the playoffs and all that as well. But Trey Jones, a guy who's going to be not very owned, has not been the most productive on the year. And even today, I'd project him for just 0.8 fantasy points per minute, but he's minimum salary. Greg, another guy that should be seeing a good amount of point guard minutes. I think there's some other point guards we're going to hit on, I think, coming up in the next few minutes that'll be very more, possibly more important and very much appealing in the same ways. But Trey Jones, are you willing to get there today? He hasn't been the most productive, but the run of minutes just should be there in a way that's hard to avoid.
So it depends on the starting lineup. I have the starting backcourt for the Spurs right now is Patty Mills and Lonnie Walker. And if that's going to be the case, then I don't know that Trey Jones plays a ton of minutes. And obviously, it's still a tough matchup against the Suns. And then also we have to, think about all the other value plays we have on the slate. So if he doesn't start, I don't necessarily think the minutes are a lock to be there for him. Like I said, right now, I think that it's going to be Patty Mills, Devin Vassell, and Lonnie Walker, those three starting in the backcourt, and then alongside Keldon Johnson and Drew Eubanks. That's what I'm expecting the starting five to be. Just a guess, though, right? Because what are we doing other than guessing, really, at this point of the year? But do you expect Trey Jones to start?
Yeah, Patty Mills hasn't started at all this year, and even in previous spots. And this has been something I actually was burned by before, where assuming that Patty Mills would start, and in fact, it was Trey Jones going in there. And I think it actually, let me see, it was definitely a DeJounte Murray out game. Let's see, last time Murray was out, it was Trey Jones starting, Patty Mills off the bench. That was May 2nd against Philadelphia. April 22nd, same thing here. You have, let's see, you have Derek White starting in this one, but that was when Derek White was available. I think the most recent game is the one that I would look at here, where, again, no starts on the year for Patty Mills. I think, too, the fact he is a vet, he's a guy that's going to be in the playoff rotation, too. I don't know why they wouldn't put Trey Jones out there as a starter. So I definitely, if you're a person, and I get why you might think that, Greg, and I certainly, again, got bit by this earlier in the year, so that's why I'm a little more aware of it. I just think that Patty Mills, expecting him to get a lot of run, still possible, I guess. He did get 31 minutes in that last game, including overtime. So you could say probably 26 minutes in a competitive spot maybe is in play. But Trey Jones started the first half, started the second half, got 21 minutes for himself. So I don't know. I think playing the young guy here is just the way that it seems like the wind's blowing.
So to me, I mean, Trey Jones, I still look at that. He only played 21 minutes that game. If Patty Mills doesn't start, then I'm not going to be playing him anyway. It's going to be easy to pivot off the Spurs guys, because this is going to be almost an entire lineup of min-price players. We have, let's see, who's the most expensive guy on the Spurs that's active today? Keldon Johnson?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Keldon Johnson. Oh, no, never mind. It's Lonnie Walker at 4,500 is the most expensive Spur that we have to choose from today. So with that in mind, I'm going to be playing these cheap guys, and then whatever the starting lineup is going to be, plenty of flexibility to swap off just whoever else is the min-price guy that's starting. So, yeah, if Trey Jones starts, I'm going to get some exposure to him. Although I still think there's going to be other value plays I prioritize, especially because, like you just said, not a good points per minute fantasy producer. And also he only played 21 minutes in that start.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the minutes could be a little higher just because, again, I think you're saving Patty Mills and trying to give him, as little bit of run as possible heading into the playoffs as a core rotational piece. But I think there's certainly some ways it's not a great spot for Trey Jones. And I just know he's popping up a lot in the boom bust tools. So to me, I'll have about a third of my lineups with him today because we only have 5% ownership expected his way. But he just hasn't been a great producer. It's more because he's minimum salary in the hopes that can make something else work here. The other guys I feel like you have to touch on for the Spurs, Devin Vassell to me is a play that I'll be getting, looks like about double the field, though that number could come up here with the ownership projections. And we will do money time coming up in 15 minutes as well. So you guys will get a read on the top 5 owned plays on Draftkings and Fanduel. And you can always get them yourselves at awesemo.com/join. Use that Gold Rush promo in particular if you want to get all the sports going. But I feel like to me, Vassell's the one play that I would point to as having a little more utility. And what are your thoughts on Lonnie Walker? You mentioned he's the most expensive Spur. I think because of the price point and the fact that he doesn't seem to have the most fantastic boom bust rating for himself, I don't see myself getting there quite as much. But give me your other Spurs priorities.
Yeah, so once again, it's going to depend if Lonnie Walker starts or not. The other thing too, though, is how much does price even matter on this slate?
Right? I mean, to some degree.
I don't know that it's that prohibitive that somebody is 4,500 as compared to 3,100 on this slate compared to other ones. I have more exposure to Lonnie Walker than I do to Trey Jones right now. I don't find it that problematic that he's a little bit more expensive. I have him projected for 8 more fantasy points right now. So to me, that's worth a 1,400 increase in salary. But other Spurs I'm getting to, like I said, Gorgui Dieng, even though I just kind of railed on that I really want to make it a priority to only roster guys who are starting, Gorgui Dieng would be one exception to that. Just because he's such a good points per minute fantasy producer. And I still think that he's somebody who is going to get minutes today. Like, I would be really surprised if he's not at least a somewhat important piece of the Spurs rotation. I think he's somebody who's going to play, in the neighborhood of 26 to 28 minutes. And you look at his numbers for the season, he scores 15.06 DraftKings points in 14.4 minutes per game. So well over a fantasy point per minute. I still think Gorgui Dieng is a pretty high priority value play. And I actually don't have an issue playing him and Drew Eubanks in the same lineups. Number one, I think they could share core time together. And then number two, they're both cheap enough and good enough points per minute fantasy producers that I don't think it's that hard to envision a scenario where both of them have good games relative to their salaries.
And I would also throw in Keita Bates-Diop into the mix too, another minimum salary guy who Awesemo is now projected for 25 minutes. Another guy who's not a great producer, but really the main thing for me is all these guys are projecting to be about 0.85-ish to a little bit more than that. Besides Drew Eubanks, he's the one that I think stands out as a 1.15 or a little bit above that fantasy point per minute guy. And Dieng too, really the big men I think are the ones you could look to as having the better per minute numbers, which is always going to be the case, or almost always going to be the case for big men anyway. But I think for the wings, just mixing in some of these guys, getting portions of Vassell, getting portions of Diop, Bates-Diop, to me, getting Keldon Johnson and Lonnie Walker as well. I think to me, I'm just going to spread it around, and that's the approach that I want to get to. Boston's another team that I'm highly prioritizing, Greg, and I'm just wondering if you're going to be there as heavy, because for me, they are like the Spurs. I think one of the core parts of what I'm trying to do today. I think the fact that there are no big men in particular makes me really like Luke Kornet as a prospect. We know what he's done. He's been a lot better in Boston, but historically, he's been a pretty good fantasy per minute guy as long as he's getting the run. But what are you seeing on Boston, and how are you handling the guard situation? Because I do think the Tremont Waters versus Peyton Pritchard part is going to be one that ownership-wise, it does seem like we have Tremont Waters expect to be a bit higher owned. People love Peyton Pritchard. I'm not sure that one actually does hold when we get to lock.
Yeah, so I'm assuming a pretty similar rotation to what the Cavs played last game, which was Waters ended up playing 22 minutes and Pritchard played 25 minutes. So I'm expecting a pretty similar ownership, a pretty similar minute split where they kind of share a lot of the point guard minutes. Right now I have 26 minutes going to Pritchard and 22 minutes going to Waters. Aaron Nesmith also is going to be in the mix. He played 22 minutes last game. I can't prioritize these guys over the Spurs, especially because we have Evan Fournier and Jason Tatum both expected to play. So what's different about the Spurs situation is not only do we have all the minutes up for grabs, but all the usage is also up for grabs because DeJounte Murray's out, Rudy Gay's out, DeMar DeRozan's out. The Celtics are still playing star. Well, I mean, I wouldn't call Evan Fournier a star, but Jason Tatum is star player. And Evan Fournier, relative to some of the other guys that are available on this
What a
slate,
ricochet shot on Evan Fournier. It's totally unwarranted. If Fournier's watching this, he's so mad.
I mean, is he? If he's watching, he's going, yeah, I'm not a star. But if you put him on the Spurs right now, he'd clearly be their best player that's available on that roster. But the thing that's important to me here is that I don't have as much usage to distribute in the Celtics lineup that I do in the Spurs lineup. So with that in mind, I don't know that Peyton Pritchard, Waters, Neesmith, and Langford's going to be in the rotation. I don't know if any of these guys are going to play over 30 minutes unless we all of a sudden get news that Fournier or Tatum aren't starting. That would be a huge red flag. But beyond that, I think the Spurs guys are much better values.
So I guess this might be the question then, because I know for Awesemo today, the minutes projection looks like it'll be just shy of 24 minutes for Tatum. Actually, just shy of 24 minutes for a lot of these guys. And I think to me, that surprises me a little bit more about Tremont Waters, because I think he could get a good amount of run here. When I actually did set a group of max one of Waters and Peyton Pritchard, because they have sort of been siphoning minutes away from each other so far. But I think you could sort of have a shot here at those guys playing minutes together. But I think this might be the question, Greg, is how many minutes are you projecting Tatum and Fournier for? Because if you're projecting them for under 24, everything opens up in a major way. But I think if you're projecting them for high 20s even, or low 30s especially, you're probably not going to see any other Celtics as usable.
I have them both for 30 minutes, but I'm just going to check something. Do the Celtics need a win today?
No. They're I believe, locked into their play-in spot. So they're going to be where they're going to be. Yeah, they're 35 and 35, so the Hornets can't catch them. I think they're basically going to be playing actually, they could play anybody, I think, out of the Hornets, Pacers, and Wizards, but none of those teams can catch them.
Let's see. Are we sure of that?
Well, I guess they might technically need to win, but I don't know how the tiebreakers work. That's the one thing I don't have in front of me. The tiebreakers are always a weird
It's
part.
head-to-head record, and they are tied with Charlotte. And then
they have 2 games on them right now, so Charlotte has to win both, and they have to lose both.
All right. And then the Pacers are also 2 games back. And who has the tiebreaker between the Pacers and the Celtics? I'm checking that now. That's also even. So I don't know what happens when it's a 3-way tie. I feel I wish I just knew these weird tiebreaker rules off the top of my head, but I still think there's a chance the Celtics need a win today.
Let's see. Celtics, who do they play tomorrow would be the question. They play the Knicks tomorrow. The Knicks also playing to win. Man, this is tough because it is sort of the key decision point where if they are playing to win, I guess sort of the signifier, though, is that they might not be, is that you are resting Smart again. You're resting Kemba again. So maybe you are ramping these guys down and just willing to let the chips fall where they may with the play-in game. Because this is important to me, because I'll say right now, I'm going to be very heavy on Tremont Waters. I think you'd be heavy on Cornette either way, because you don't have Robert Williams in the mix. You don't have Tristan Thompson in the mix. I don't know. I just think they're ebbing more towards resting, but that could be an incorrect assumption. I just feel a little more confidence with that take because Awesemo, they've given the minutes haircut.
All right. I'm looking up the playoff scenarios here, and let's see what I could figure out.
Okay, there you go. Okay, that's what people are saying in the chat. It's actually funny that people in the chat saying Celtics need to win. Celtics are locked in. Celtics are locked in. I thought they were locked in too, but Rob Warrior, LMAO said he's going to be heavy on Cornette and Waters. Rob, come back and say that take tomorrow and see how you feel. You have to play guys who are going to get minutes, and when there's nobody else who's going to get minutes, that is an important part. But Rob Warrior, I'm sure you know this guy whose name has never been in the chat before.
According to NBA.com, Celtics are locked into the 7th seed. Yeah.
Okay, so Greg, how does that affect your take then if they are locked into the 7th seed?
So it's going to depend now if they start. As long as they're starting, maybe 30 minutes might be aggressive, but I still think they're going to get run in both the first and second half. And even if I give them 24 minutes, let's say, it's still going to make the Spurs higher priorities for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say that I would still favor Boston here, and I think that's going to be your chases may vary, your taste may vary with this stuff. But let's talk about some of the plays here for Boston, and I guess let's talk about the way that I'm viewing it, and then Greg has sort of given his take. If you are feeling like Tatum and Fournier starting gives you more confidence, I think it does feel more like a Marcus Morris situation where they'll start but probably play decreased run and maybe not even start the second half would be my cause for concern. And I think in that case, that's what opens up guys like Tremont Waters. Cornette is again going to be a play either way because they don't have big men, and that is an important part when you're going against Karl Anthony Towns and also a team that has a good amount of big men on the bench. For people out there who seem to be confused as to why Luke Cornette would be a play today, but also Tremont Waters on the year has been very productive in a way that I feel like Peyton Pritchard, at least on paper, has not been. I know that may be jarring for people to hear out there, but Tremont Waters has a 35.5% assist rate for himself, a 20% usage rate. It's been a 0.96 fantasy point per minute guy, which is actually right there in line with Evan Fournier. I think Tremont Waters is the guy that people maybe sleep on because Peyton Pritchard's gotten the better fantasy results for the most part. Certainly has had some chalk disappointment days. But how are you feeling if we are going to assume, Greg, that Tatum and Fournier are somewhat limited here? How would you get that breakdown for yourself? Do you want to go heavier Waters? Do you want to go Peyton Pritchard? Or are you still really favoring the Spurs guys heavily?
All right. So let's say I just take 6 minutes away from from Fournier, and I'd give it all to Waters. So now I would have Waters playing 28 minutes. In 28 minutes for Waters, he actually has decent points per minute fantasy production this year. So I'd probably be expecting somewhere in the neighborhood, let's see, so 25 fantasy points then for Waters. That would still be below where I have Gorgie Jang. It would be below where I have Drew Eubanks, but that would put him certainly ahead of Trey Jones. It would put him ahead of all of the Spurs guards. He would just be behind the big men for the Spurs. So yeah, if I was to expect 24 minutes out of Tatum and Fournier, then yes, that would actually make Waters somebody who I would be prioritizing. That's just not how I have it at the moment.
Okay, so that's one thing that you can sort of decide for yourself today amongst many things you'll probably have to decide for yourself. And again, this is a game that is not in the early lock window, so make sure you're paying attention here for the next hour and change to know who Boston is starting, because that is definitely going to be a picture here that is important. Waters did start last game. Pritchard came off the bench, and Pritchard ended up with a better fantasy day. So keep that in mind here, that it could still go a variety of ways. We talk more about the value guys, Greg, but I feel like one spot that might be helpful for people is what are you paying up for on the slate? And I think to me, there are a couple spots that you can sort of target and has some degree of safety too. Julius Randle is one to me where New York can still catch the Hawks, or at least, is playing as though they are going to be able to for themselves. We'll see if they actually can or not. But I think that to me means Julius Randle playing a good amount of run. I would have liked to have seen Derrick Rose out because I think that opens up a little bit more. But in terms of pay up options, I think Julius Randle is one guy I feel the most confidence in, especially given that we still don't know Domantas Sabonis' status, Greg.
Yeah, Julius Randle is by far the safest. So right now, my most used pay-up options are Julius Randle and Domantas Sabonis. The reason being is because these are two teams where winning is more important than it is for basically anybody else that's playing today. So Julius Randle to me, really high priority, also somewhat favorable price tag. So Julius Randle to me is the overall safest pay-up option on the slate. And then everything else is just kind of in flux in terms of pay-up options. We're still waiting to find out if Karis LeVert and Domantas Sabonis are playing. But beyond that, this is very much a gut feeling. I think the Nets starters are going to play closest to full minutes today. Not they're going to go out and play like 36 or 38 minutes, but I think that Harden, Kyrie, and Durant are all going to play in the neighborhood of 30 minutes because I think they just want to get them some reps together heading into the playoffs. They've played 7 games together the entire season with all of them active. This is a game against the Bulls that's not really majorly important, although the 2 seed is still up for grabs in the Eastern Conference, but the Nets are almost in all likelihood going to win this game as 11.5-point favorites. But I also think that they're going to go out, and I think they're going to play their starters a good run of minutes just to get a little bit of continuity heading into the playoffs. So I have overweight exposure actually to Kyrie, Durant, and Harden for the slate.
So I actually, I don't know if I'm overweight. Let me just see what my most recent numbers were from the crunch that I just did. But I was getting some of these guys too, I think, just because you do have to spend your money somewhere. I got about 10% of each, and I feel okay with that one. It does look like the field on DraftKings will be a little bit heavier than that on Kyrie and Kevin Durant, a little bit lower on Harden. The rotations for Harden last game were weird, where he didn't play any at all in the first quarter, then played pretty meaningful stints in the second, third, and fourth quarter. Him starting, I think I would agree that he does get a pretty good amount of run here just to make sure that he's ready to go for the playoffs. And I agree too with your take about just needing to play those guys minutes together. I guess, is there one of them that's more of a priority than the others for you from Brooklyn? Because I think for me, it's just a matter of, hey, you got to spend the salary somewhere. I think it's also worth pointing out, I did do a quick run of lineup study this morning, and pretty much all the top lineups were still over a 49.5 salary on DraftKings. I think actually most of them were still over 49.7. Maybe won't be the case today, but I'm still targeting spending most of the salary cap and not leaving a lot of money on the table. But with all that in mind, Greg, which guys would you prioritize? If you had to rank the Brooklyn guys, how would you do that if you could?
All right. So right now I have the most exposure to Kyrie, then to Durant, then to James Harden. However, if Sabonis is ruled out, I'm going to need to spend more money at the forward position. And then I suspect that I'm going to end up with more exposure to Durant than Kyrie.
Okay. I got more of Durant and Kyrie, as I mentioned, though not a lot more. I think to me, just 10% of these guys seems about right. You think you could certainly get 15% and not feel too bad about it. I don't know that I want to get them above the field, because even if these guys are going to play meaningful minutes, you still never know who the hot hand's going to be. And they could also just sort of half up that, or, three-way slice that production up. But still, I think getting these guys in lineups, you got to spend that money somewhere. We got a super chat here from Arkathelza, who missed our mental gymnastics trying to figure out the Pacers being clinched or not, or locked into the Celtics being locked to their spot or not. What games matter? Who needs a win? I think the ones that I'm prioritizing as teams that need a win or that are pushing for a win would be New York. I don't think Brooklyn needs to win. The Lakers do need a win, but the minutes there, I think, are weird. The price tags are weird enough that I don't know that I would consider them a priority. The Pacers don't need a win, right?
No, the Pacers do need a win. The Pacers right now could be as high as the 8 seed, but they could be as low as the 10 seed.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They need a win to try to get home court for the play-in game.
Charlotte needs a win also.
Yeah, so Charlotte needs a win.
The Nets have the 2 seed, but they could fall to the 3 seed. So the way that this also has some implications is, let's say the Nets end up losing today. This is kind of more from a betting perspective. So right now, it looks like the betting market is assuming that the Bucks are not going to be playing their starters heavy minutes today. The Heat are a fairly decent favorite over the Bucks tonight. If the Nets end up losing, then the Bucks are live to move up to the 2 seed, and I expect that they would play all their starters full minutes, and that would make the Bucks good bets as underdogs for tonight's slate. But right now, Nets favored by 11.5 points. Also, the Bulls aren't playing Zach LaVine today, so I expect the Nets should win this game pretty easily. But also because I think that the Nets are going to want to give their core 3 all around the neighborhood of 30 minutes, just so they have a little bit of more time on the court playing together this season.
I think Phoenix is also playing like they need a win, even though they don't really need one, but they could still technically catch Utah, I believe, and they've been playing their full allotment of minutes recently, though Ayton did sit last game, so maybe that's starting to go the other direction. But I think Phoenix is a team, I don't know that they need the win, Greg, but are they a team that you're getting a good amount of? Because it does seem like ownership-wise, people are targeting them as though they're a team that is going to play their normal allotment of minutes and play, for full effort.
Not really. I have 10% exposure to Chris Paul and 20% Devin Booker right now. Those numbers would have to go up if Sabonis is ruled out, just because I need other guys to spend up for. But that's where I'm at right now. So they're in my player pool, not really a massive amount of exposure. My expectation for the Suns is I think they're going to play their starters today, get the win. And then I think they rest their guys tomorrow, playing on the tail end of the back-to-back against the Spurs again.
And the Nets starting James Harden. So there's one bit of news that we did. I guess it's helpful to know. Harden, Irving, Brown, Durant, and Blake Griffin starting for the Nets. And I guess, does that give you any more interest in Harden than you would have had normally? Or I think you said you assumed that he was starting anyway.
Yeah. Actually, the guy who this gives me a little more interest in is maybe Bruce Brown, although not like a significant amount, but just makes him viable now, starting in place of Joe Harris. But no, I was expecting this to be the Nets starting lineup. Steve Nash had said earlier that Harden was going to start, so nothing unexpected there.
All right, we're at about past the halfway point of the show now, so let me just refresh the ownership projections. We'll do our final money time of the regular season so we can get one more in. And smash that like button, guys. This is honestly chaos for us here. We're trying to make sure to stay on top of everything. And in addition to knowing playoffs standings and all of that, I woke up at 6:30 this morning on the West Coast to just make sure I had stuff in line for this one. So please hit that like button here, show us some love, and we'll give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and Fanduel according to Awesemo's ownership projections. And number 1 on the ownership on DraftKings, Drew Eubanks, 51%. Number 2, Julius Randle, 38%. Number 3, Karl Anthony Towns at 34%. Number 4, Trey Jones up to 28% for himself. And number 5, D'Angelo Russell at 27%. Greg, does any of those surprise you? I feel like the Trey Jones number coming up is a little bit of surprise, and Towns being that high too, given that the value today is at center. To me, I think I'm a little surprised he's that loftily owned.
Yeah, well, I mean, based on what we've seen from the Timberwolves lately, I kind of understand, because I expect he's going to play full minutes. He's obviously a really good fantasy producer, although he's gotten in a ton of foul trouble over the last couple of weeks. But I mean, if he's able to avoid foul trouble, think about who he's getting matched up against too. I don't know if the field is thinking about it this deep. I think it just might be that, like, hey, here's somebody who is easy to get to, and maybe they don't have confidence in the playing time for some of the other stars who are already locked into playoff spots. But we're expecting so before we're talking about Luke Cornett, and people have been mentioning him as a somewhat popular play. So if the expectation from people is that Luke Cornett is going to play big minutes from the Celtics, is he not just going to get destroyed by Karl Anthony Towns?
Oh yeah, I mean he is, but so would Grant Williams. So like, what's the alternative? I mean, Taco's going to get destroyed. Like, they're all going to get destroyed.
But my point being is that it's a very easy matchup for Karl Anthony Towns. Therefore, that's where the ownership is.
Ooh, Towns' ownership is going to go up too, because Domantas Sabonis has been ruled out, which is not. I'm going to have to redo some stuff here. But
Karis LeVert in.
Yeah, Karis LeVert has to take a gigantic step upwards as well. Karis LeVert is in, but we'll just give you guys the rest of the ownership here, and I'll let you guys know how things look. And we do get one more run of ownership because obviously this is not accounting for Sabonis being out. Julius Randle, number 1 on FanDuel right now at 41%. Devin Booker, number 2 at 32%. LaMelo Ball, number 3 at 31%. D'Angelo Russell, number 4 at 30%. And Karl Anthony Towns on FanDuel as well, number 5 at 27%. And yeah, I guess to me, with Sabonis being off the board, I mean, how much Levert's enough Levert, I guess would be the question, because like, what else do they have? And I think Goga now too, Goga has to be there amongst like Eubanks and Jang and Luke Cornett as one of the higher priority plays at center.
Yeah, so we've got 26 minutes now, so I am definitely interested to see what the Pacers starting lineup is, but Goga likely becomes my favorite overall value play now. Like I'd rather roster Goga than Eubanks. Batadze has been a really good fantasy producer when he stepped on the court, and I don't really think he's sharing minutes with anybody unless he gets in foul trouble. I think that Eubanks and Jang are likely splitting starter minutes. Splitting center minutes. So Batadze this year, who has made 2 starts, he got in foul trouble in both of them, so he only played 24 minutes per game, but he still averaged 29 Draftkings points in those starts. He doesn't get in foul trouble. I mean, Goga Batadze, excellent fantasy producers, probably looking at a really big fantasy game.
Man, this sucks because I really want to dig my heels on Luke Cornett after the slander that was thrown the Unicornet's way earlier. But I think Goga to me becomes, let's see, let me just make sure, because we actually already got a projections update from Awesemo. So if you guys are trying to get that and you are a premium member, make sure to go over to the site and check that out now. And Karis LeVert now for Awesemo looks like he's projected to be I got to take out the Miami-Milwaukee game. Looks like he's projected to be the 5th best play on the slate. So for you, Greg, Karis LeVert, how much of a priority is he? Because I really think the move is just to jam him in as much as possible now, within reason.
Yeah, he's probably going to be in the majority of my lineups at this point, maybe even all of them. I don't know, because I'm going to rerun them right now. Maybe 100% might be a little aggressive just because I still want to get to Kyrie. I still want to get to Harden and some of those other guards. But yeah, I'm going to be getting to a whole bunch of Karis LeVert now. He's a very high priority pay up option. And by the way, we also had one other super chat here that I think we missed from Ruben Mitchell, who asked thoughts on FanDuel Schroeder's upside with LeBron and AD back. And I don't have interest in Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah, Schroeder's still kind of priced for where he was playing a lot better with LeBron off the floor, and his splits definitely support that, as you might expect when you lose a guy who's been so ball dominant in terms of rebounds and assists and usage. A lot of that did go to Schroeder, but now with LeBron back in, I don't see the reason to go there. And I think this is a sort of segue here into another question, Greg. How much LeBron and AD are you playing? Because at their price tags, I think it's very hard to get there with the added component too of like if LeBron were out, I think you could make the case to play AD. You could have made the case to play Schroeder, but now with them all priced that highly and everybody in, I can't get to them, even though I do know the game matters for them. And that does scare me a little bit.
I have in between 5 to 10% of both of them. They're low priorities relative to the other pay up options on the slate. But I mean, a lot of the other guys I don't have the utmost amount of confidence in, so there's still guys going to be working in a small percentage. And by the way, more news, DeAndre Ayton out, and the Pacers starting lineup is Karis LeVert, Justin Holiday, Doug McDermott, O'Shea Brissett, and Goga Batadze.
All right, so Goga to me. So Goga looks like he's projected for, I have him at 26.8 fantasy points on DK. Looks like Awesemo has Goga Batadze at 26.7. So that is right in line there. Goga about a 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy on the year. I would still put Drew Eubanks ahead of Goga. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think to me it's Eubanks 1, Goga 2, and then Cornett 3, and Jang 2 is sort of a 3B to Cornett.
Now that we know Goga's starting, there's a couple of things here. Is like I said, he didn't play a whole bunch of minutes in the last 2 starts we had. However, he got in foul trouble in both of them, and he left one of them early with an injury. So while he played 25 and a half and 23 minutes in those 2 starts, it's not hard to envision a scenario where Goga doesn't get hurt today, doesn't get in foul trouble, and he plays over 30 minutes. We've seen him do that in starts in the past. If I go back to last year, the last start that he made last year, he played 32 minutes in it. He also fouled out. By the way, listen to the fouls that Goga has in his starts for his career. Last year in a start against the Bulls, he fouled out in 19 minutes. The follow-up start against the Charlotte Hornets, he fouled out in 32 minutes. Then his starts this year, he played 25 minutes and picked up 4 personal fouls. And in the other start, he played 23 minutes, picked up 4 personal fouls, and also left the game early because he sprained his ankle. So maybe there's a part of it where it's just like, hey, something is going to happen to inhibit Goga Bitadze's minutes. But at the same time, too, we've seen him play as many as 33 minutes when he started before. And if he is able to stay out of foul trouble, I view him as a much better fantasy producer than Eubanks or Jang, and I would expect him to play more minutes than those guys.
Yeah, I get where you're going for with it, and I certainly don't have any arguments to it. I think it was funny to hear Goga's career distilled down to that, but it is how it's been recently. And the thing with Goga is that I guess this is one thing where you could say maybe they would go the other way just to try to go small and get different here and hope that you could play like Drummond off the floor. Is there a world here where you might consider playing like forcing Brissett in lineups where you're not getting Goga Bitadze? Because I do think that's one pathway where I could see Goga failing, is that the Pacers just realize, hey, we're not getting it done here. Might as well try to get Drummond and stretch him out, or whoever else is going to be playing at center. I think that's one pathway here for Goga to fail.
Well, the way he fails is if he gets in foul trouble. And based on some of the results I looked at, maybe the chance of him getting in foul trouble is like 80% in this game going up against Anthony Davis and Andre Drummond. But I really do think that he's the highest upside center if he's able to keep his hands to himself today.
We have not talked much about Chicago, and they're also a team that's going to get an added boost here. No Tomas Satoransky for themselves, no Zach LaVine. And for my exposures for Chicago, I wasn't getting anybody meaningfully, but I was getting a little bit of everybody. Now it looks like I'm actually getting a good amount of Lowry Markkanen, which is not a direction I expected to go for myself, but I think that's sort of the results of not having Sabonis in the mix and getting more Karl Anthony Towns at center. But what Bulls are you getting? Because I think Kobe White people may flock to a little more than they should, just in chasing that Zach LaVine absence upside. But you still do have Nikola Vucevic in the mix. You still have Markkanen in there. You still have enough bodies where I don't think Kobe White should be treated as the same play as some of the value guys who open things up. And to me, I'd also rather have Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, Chris Paul, Kyrie, like a lot of other guys. But how are you viewing the Bulls? Is anybody jumping out meaningfully as a priority?
All right, so my lineups are updating right now for the Pacers news. Lots of Karis LeVert, lots of Goga Bitadze. Nobody else is a priority. So from the Bulls, I'm not really getting too many guys now that we have so many options available from other teams. So I have a little bit of exposure to Thad Young, a little bit of Patrick Williams, a little bit of Kobe White. But ultimately, there's just better plays on a points per dollar basis. And it's another slate where I have so many everybody, it's not just me. Everybody has access to the same players, but we have so many cheap guys that are viable for today that I still think even if some of these high-priced guys maybe don't have the same upside we normally do, like let's say Anthony Davis goes out and scores 45 fantasy points. James Harden scores 50 fantasy points. On most days, that's not a great result for these guys relative to their price tags. On this particular slate, I think it probably is, because the raw points are going to be so much more important when we're going to have so many cheap guys having decent fantasy games.
I'm actually surprised. I'm getting a little bit less Goga than I would have thought. I'm only getting 30% Goga, and I definitely, that's not any sort of cap I have on him. I could get 70%, and I wonder what there's some weird things that are going to happen, I think, with line construction today, where you probably just got to take it as what it is. But Goga to me it's not going to be as big of a priority, I guess. I think because of Towns. Man, this is a weird slate. Is there anything you're noticing in your crunches that are jumping out from like a lineup construction standpoint? Because like you do give a little bit more to Towns, you're going to lose one of the value centers, then the value is going to be spread around elsewhere. And it does seem like you have some real butterfly effect situations here when you change any of your exposures.
I am not getting to very much Towns now, and I'm trying to change that. But just because I have so much exposure to let's see. And also, what is the positionality for some of these guys? So Eubanks on DraftKings only has center eligibility. Jang only has center eligibility. Goga only has center eligibility. So with that in mind, that is really making it hard for me to get to Karl Anthony Towns. And I would like to get to Karl Anthony Towns, except the optimizer is telling me that, hey, getting to Karl Anthony Towns is not quite optimal on this slate.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned by that. I think I'm going to cap myself at 40% Towns just so I get a little bit more of the value centers. But yeah, if you are trying to get value, and I'm still not getting a lot of Goga. I'm surprised that I'm not able to trick Goga up a little bit higher. yeah, that's just how it's going to be, I guess. But got to make some tough choices on the slate more than any. And we had some questions as well about DeAndre Ayton. I think this is something that is probably worth hitting on a little bit, because that is one way you can get a sort of pseudo center exposure without playing an actual center position on DraftKings. You can play Dario Saric. Dario Saric historically has been the guy who does start these games. I guess there is an outside chance getting a Frank Kaminsky start. But Greg, who is the beneficiary here? People are asking about who gets the usage. There really isn't any more usage that goes around from a lack of Ayton. It's just that the minutes get constructed in a different way. You do get more Dario Saric in the mix, or Frank Kaminsky.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing to consider here also is, so with DeAndre Ayton, he's been, not really prolific on offense this year. He's actually upped his game on defense a lot. He went from a guy who, coming out of college, looked like he was going to be a terrible defensive player in the NBA to now somebody who's not only a viable defensive player, but he's actually a plus defensive player. And that's one of the reasons that the Suns have had a better defense. And part of that is because he's taken a big step back on offense in terms of usage, and he's able to exert more energy on defense. I mean, he only has an 18.3% usage rate this year. And if you go over the last 2 weeks, 12.2% usage rate for DeAndre Ayton. Over the last month, 14.1% usage rate. So already a guy whose usage is way down this year. And as the season's gone on, he's taken less and less of a role on offense. So Ayton, to me, is going to create some other value plays here. Like Dario Saric, to me, now is a very strong value option. But it doesn't really significantly change my outlook on Devin Booker or Chris Paul.
Also, I got to give you credit. You get a victory lap here. Patty Mills starting for the Spurs alongside Devin Vassell, Walker, Johnson, Eubanks. So they're going with the more season-handed point guard. And I think actually thinking about it now, like that construction makes more sense if you're going to play, Vassell, Walker, Johnson, and Eubanks to have like a more experienced point guard in there rather than Trey Jones doing what he does. But I would say as a result, like I think your earlier take was good about Mills, but also like I would probably not want any Trey Jones exposure because he's going to be owned a good amount because he was that minimum salary guy. And if Mills is getting that run, I think just flipping those exposures to Mills is one of the better tournament moves you can make with 15 minutes left.
Yeah, and I mean, by the way, there's no reason to take victory laps at this point because I mean, we're taking victory because like what Patty Mills could easily go out and play 8 minutes and then just suck as a play. So way too early to take any victory laps on anything at this point of the season. But I'm not interested in Trey Jones.
Yeah, to me, Trey Jones, I mean, I'm going to give him, I think, a 5% cap for himself, and I'm going to see what the minutes look like from Awesemo here. But minimum salary for Trey Jones, I think there are going to be people who don't play like you guys do. You're paying attention, you're watching this show till the last minute, you're following whatever handles that you're following for news. A lot of people out there are just going to look at lineups, look at, outdated data and just put a guy in. And I think Trey Jones, to me, the wind was blowing historically for him starting. He's not starting because I think of this younger group overall. So Mills, a much better play. And Mills is already projected for 18% ownership, but I think that's probably low for what he should have been or what he should be now.
All right. I'm running another. Are you going to get to Dario Saric much?
I was getting to him. In the last run, I didn't. Oh, we didn't have 8 out in the last run, so I'm not sure yet. I'm going to wait to run a crunch until we get the updated Spurs minutes, but he does look like the best value play at power forward to me now.
So here's what is really favorable to me about Dario Saric. And actually, I'm getting to more Saric than Eubanks or Batadze. So I have Batadze and Eubanks both projected for more fantasy points than Saric. However, since Saric has power forward eligibility on DraftKings, I'm getting to more exposure to him than those guys.
Yeah, power forward on DraftKings, I think, is a pretty crappy position where like Lowry Markkanen was popping up a lot for me because there just isn't a whole lot there. But I think Brissett to me has gotten better looking now because of not having Sabonis in there. You also have Saric looking a lot better as well, as Greg mentioned. To me, he's one of the best value plays on the slate overall with a 26.5 fantasy point projection for him. I agree. Like, I think there is some things lineup construction wise. The downside is that if you play Saric, you're then getting one less roster spot to play Julius Randle in. And I think to me, he's one of the safer plays still. So I'm prioritizing Randle at position, but I think if I get 30% Saric, I wouldn't be mad.
You know what's really funny about this slate is I'll be in the middle of updating a team and then new news comes out. So I want to go check that out. And then I realize like, oh, I didn't finish updating this other news item. So I'm running my line. It's like, how come I still have, how come I'm still getting exposure to these guards from the Spurs? It's like, oh yeah, because I only did that halfway. And then I jumped over to the Suns to give Saric more minutes.
Yeah, it's all very confusing. The Jenga piece part of this all with the lineup construction is going to be chaotic. And tomorrow it'll be even more chaotic for our final live before lock. If you are trying to do, or not final live before lock, obviously, but our final regular season NBA live before lock, it'll be Josh and Terry at 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, taking you through a 15 gamer of news. So that'll be, I'm sure, great joy. And then there's another live before lock at 6 p.m. Eastern with our pal Eric Lindquist, going to hang out with Jason Floyd and do some great picks, 6 p.m. Eastern time as well. So double the live before locks, double the chalk with Eric. Have a great time for yourself tuning in then. So you never know when you're gonna get an Eric impression now. That's
no, you never. It just gets mixed in because it's really more of a treat. There was a thing where there was a point in time where it was very heavily featured, the Eric impression. Now it comes in and out.
You got to ramp it back and then dial it back up. That's what I try to do with my one trick ponies here. I guess besides Money Time, which is now I just got to do that shtick every show. Anything else that you want to hit on here? Because I don't even know what my exposures are going to be. I am getting more Anthony Davis, it looks like. I'm going to run my crunch here. Have you changed your stance at all on Jason Tatum, or at least dialed back the exposure? Or are you still riding with him as a prominent part of your lineups?
So to be clear, I was never getting exposure to Jason Tatum.
Cool.
It was just the minutes I gave him was enough to where guys like Waters, Nesmith weren't guys that were high priority plays for me. And yeah, that still hasn't changed. I have 5% Peyton Pritchard. I have 5% Waters. I am much more prioritizing cheap guys like Dario Saric, Eubanks, Batadze, even some of the Spurs guys, Devin Vassell. I have a little bit too much exposure to Patty Mills. I'd like to dial that back because I'm not totally confident in his minutes. But yeah, there are just other cheap plays I like more than the Celtics guys.
We have not gotten an uptick in minutes on Patty Mills, and I'm wondering if that's maybe our Awesemo data team here thinking that Mills is not going to get more run as a starter. So I don't know if that affects things. Maybe we'll get one update here coming through, but that hasn't come through yet, and it gives me a little bit of concern about the minutes run. I might just change it on my own end just for the sake of it.
I don't think Patty Mills is going to play a massive amount of minutes. I think that he's going to play enough minutes, though, where for me, it makes him a better value than guys like Nesmith or Pritchard.
I'm going to give him 28. Like that, 28 feels like a reasonable number to me. And I'm just saying that, obviously pulling it entirely out of my ass.
Yeah, but there's no other way to do it at this point of the season. Like, because there's no scientific way to be like, oh, this is exactly how many minutes that Patty Mills is going to play. Yeah, the range of outcomes here is really wide. If he plays 8 minutes, not surprising. If he plays 30 minutes, not surprising. Anything in between, that's also in play. But I mean, just that he's starting and he's cheap, that makes me feel good about him. When you look at the outlook of the other guys in the Spurs lineup, like, all right, so the starting five for them, who leads them in usage?
I don't want to look. I don't want to cheat the process. I think it's got to be Patty Mills has the most usage out of all of them, but like Keldon Johnson and Lonnie Walker are probably not that far behind.
But that's the thing also, is that I think with the situation with Evan Fournier and Jason Tatum both in the starting line, even if we're going to expect them to play limited minutes, there's way more usage opportunity for Patty Mills than there are for the Celtics guys. Now, the minutes, obviously, like we said, there's a whole lot of variance there, but I think the variance exists in the minutes for everybody, and I just think there's more upside in usage for Mills.
All right, I'm getting a lot of Spurs now. I am just, this shit is all over the place. Like, where I was not really equipped to handle any of this today while doing a show, but boy, we're going to push through it as best as we can. And let me make sure that I got the most recent minutes. Yeah. All right. So no updates to the Awesemo minutes. So screw it. I'm doing it on my own. I'm going commando with the minutes projections. And do you remember when there was the court hearings about DFS and part of its legality at the time was like, it's a skill game and there's game of skill. Yeah.
There's not luck involved. Let me tell you, this would not have been the best slate to try to make that stance on, because I'm going through, I give somebody where it's like, oh, what if Goga plays 2 more minutes? And then it entirely changes every single one of my lineups.
Yeah, I don't love it when the trickle downs are that prominent where, like I mentioned, like I changed 1 or 2 things and like and there are certain things too. We do this enough every day. Like you guys obviously playing as well as the same thing, but like, we get a good read on how to approach a slate for the most part from having to see them every single day and cover them and give you guys our best takes as possible. And in this particular situation, I don't know what to do, because like everything, you change one thing and then like I like Goga a lot as a play, but I'm only getting 25% Goga and that feels wrong to me, but I don't know how to make it different.
Yeah, I just lowered Goga and Eubanks a little bit just so I'd get to more towns. Because my first run when I updated it with Saric and Goga, I had 0% towns. I was like, okay, I can't have that. So then I changed it. It's like, well, what if I just give Towns like a few more minutes just for the heck of it? So he comes up in lineups. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well now Towns is in 80% of my lineups from 0. So now I have him in 20% of my lineups, and that feels like a correct amount where I'm still getting to, Towns 20%, then I have a little bit more of Durant and Kyrie than that. And then I have 10% AD, 10% LeBron. So now I feel like I'm at a spot where I'm relatively comfortable with it. But yeah, this is still a mess.
Steve Tato in the YouTube chat. And if you guys have any questions, drop them in. I'll also check the premium Slack to see if there's anything in here as well. But asking one that I think some people will ask, can you play LeVert, Goga, Brissett together in the same lineup on FanDuel, Greg, would be the question he's asking. And I wouldn't mind it. I would be a little bit more inclined to maybe do one of Goga or Brissett, but I think it can work out. So I'm not fully opposed.
Yeah, I have no issue with it, especially because of the positions there. I mean, Brissett to me is definitely one of the better forward options overall on FanDuel. And then for Goga at center, yeah, I think his upside is immense. And then LeVert's just a no-brainer play at this point.
Yeah, I honestly feel like I should cut my Drew Eubanks exposure a little just to try to get more centers in the mix, because I think that's what's directly pulling from these other guys. And oh man, Gorgie Jang is gonna go off here. I'm gonna have too much Eubanks. I hate basketball. I love trash basketball so much. If you guys have watched for years, you guys will maybe remember some of the shows where Josh and I had great fun debating some of the trash players at the end of the seasons, the guys that get run that nobody else is paying attention to all year, but you sort of pick up from just having to look at minutes and all this all year long. And when it gets like this though, where you can't even play the guys that you want to play enough, it just makes me sad. That's how I feel about it.
So do we have a run of ownership? I'm kind of interested to see the difference in ownership at this point between Drew Eubanks and Gorgie Jang.
Let me see. I'll refresh it. And also, we had one question. Do you have any Kobe White thoughts? We had this from IRM Land. I know we talked about it briefly, but anything specific to Kobe White and LeBron? We've talked about. He's a pay-up option that comes with some risk, and you can get there because you have unlimited salary to get there. But I don't think Greg or I had the highest confidence levels for LeBron.
Right now, Kobe White is a really, really low priority play for me. The reason being is it's another stars and scrubs slate. I have so many just crappy min price guys just paired with stars who I have no clue how many minutes they're going to play. But I think that is the optimal build for this slate. And then I also think that raw points matter so much more than points per dollar on this. Like somebody had said to me on Twitter the other day, like 2 days ago, sure, Russell Westbrook scored 70 fantasy points, but he was a bad play because he was this salary and it was only whatever it was 5.8x salary. It's like, all right, well, you lost if you didn't play him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at this point in the season if somebody isn't the best play overall points per dollar, because the actual points matter so much more when the salary restraints aren't a big deal. So with that in mind, Kobe White kind of gets pinched from my lineups just because I don't think it matters that he's mid-priced and I have him projected to score, 35 fantasy points or whatever it is as a good value points per dollar, because it's not hard to get up to the guys who are more expensive that I think are going to score more than him.
Yeah, and there are still just enough bodies there that I think, you don't really have to get to a Kobe White on the slate. I have some exposure, so I'm not going to fully, dump on the plate entirely, but it is still one that to me, I don't think that Kobe White's the priority play, because you can just go different directions. You could save money and you can get to Karis LeVert, who might have an unlimited ceiling on a slate like this one. The ownership numbers did get updated a few minutes ago as well. Eubanks still looking chalky, but a little bit less chalky. Julius Randle still holding up top. LeVert now one of the highest owned plays on DraftKings at 30%, a little bit under that. Russell's come up a little bit as well. And on FanDuel, Karis LeVert also came up a bunch here. So really the main change, Greg, for your question earlier, just means it looks like there's a lot more Karis LeVert, and on FanDuel, a lot more Anthony Davis because of people losing Sabonis as a power forward option.
I like Goga a lot now looking at these ownerships. I mean, only 3 minutes, but I'm going to do one more run where I up Goga. 43% Eubanks to 12% Goga. I think that their outlooks are fairly similar. Like I said, I think that Goga has more upside, just to depend if he could stay out of foul trouble. But I don't think that Eubanks warrants 4x the ownership of Goga Bitadze.
I would agree with you, and I'm trying to flip that too here. So I'm going to get 50% Eubanks, it looks like, and 46% Bitadze, and I feel like that's a better grouping of numbers for me.
Yeah, and then on FanDuel, where it's a little bit different, you can only roster one center, and Goga is also a little more expensive at $4,500, 7% ownership for Goga. I understand the salary restraints are different, so it's just easier for people to go up and pay for Towns, but that's a really strong alternate lineup construction, in my opinion, if you're rostering a 7% owned Goga Batadze.
Yeah, I think getting Gog exposure to me would be a priority. The news came in late here, as we talked about. Sometimes people just don't make those changes because they love how their lineups look, but there are some ways that are going to be worth it. Let's see. Rob Ory is just a toxic dude. Just take a breather, man. Just take a time out here. Run a lap, figure it out, come back with a better attitude. It'd be nice to see your fellow people in chat. There's no reason to be a dick. Let's talk about LeVert more, because I think people in the chat are curious about LeVert. LeVert can have the ball more in his hands. What was your final LeVert exposure, given the fact that he's now one of the chalkiest plays on the slate?
He's in 90% of my lineups. There's so much him and Julius Randle. They're two guys who, at the very least, I know they're playing minutes. Unless something goes horribly wrong, LeVert gets hurt again, or just the game is a total blowout. The Pacers are looking for a win today. The Knicks are looking for a win. So I'm expecting as many minutes as those guys could handle as long as the games are competitive.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to me. I have some concern that maybe there's some world that TJ McConnell ends up siphoning some of that production away, and then he ends up being the tournament option that ends up being useful. But I just don't know how you can't play LeVert a lot, given the fact that the field's going to be there, but not as high as they should be. It looks like, based on the ownership run that we had, that we'll see how it comes out in practice. Any final thoughts for yourself, Greg? This has been a wacky slate by even the standards of some of the recent ones, but I think we tried our best to make sense of it. Also, hope you guys are having a profitable day. But anything else you want to give to the people before we jump off?
No, hey, thanks to everybody who tuned. I mean, all regular season, it went pretty fast. I don't know how many shows you and I did together, but it feels like it was a million of them. And it was fun. We got a lot of engagements. Some of them were nice. We made new friends, new enemies for sure. And I appreciate everybody.
Yeah, we very much appreciate you guys for riding with us all season long. Make sure you are checking out the content we have coming up on the channel later today. As I mentioned, we've got a NASCAR strategy show coming up with Jason Floyd and our guy Phil. We also have Jason Floyd and Josh coming up later for a UFC Live Before Lock. There's an MLB Live Before Lock later today with Emac and Gundacker. And tomorrow, the main event with all the craziness going on in the NBA, you get Josh and Terry for an early morning on the West Coast, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. East Coast time, NBA Live Before Lock. And then one more to close it out tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time is going to be our final NBA Live Before Lock of the regular season with Jason, Floyd, and Eric. So make sure you're checking all that out. Use that Gold Rush promo as well if you want to get 25% off of your month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. There's so many sports going on right now, and if you are tired of NBA or you're just fatigued of it all, well, A, there's playoffs coming up, so don't be too fatigued of it. But B, go check out some of the other sports out there. A lot of the same principles are going to apply in DFS. That's why guys like Awesemo, Steve Buzzard, some of the names that you see up top, our founder Tom as well, our CEO Tom, a lot of guys here do well across a lot of sports, because if you know how to play one DFS sport, you can usually figure out, if you have the right data, how to play the other. So use that promo code GOLDRUSH at awesemo.com/join. We appreciate you guys for hanging with us. Follow the news, watch out for starting lineups. We'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.